Story 1. My wife left me for weeks and admitted to cheating on me for 4 years because she was bored and now wants me back. I'm pretty lost with my current situation and looking for any sort of insight. My wife, 39F, and I, 40M, have been married for 17 years. As mentioned, we have 3 daughters, 15, 13, and 1. We're high school sweethearts, having been together for about 23 years now. I know almost nothing, but here's the only information I have. My wife came home 3 days ago from work. She had to work on the 4th. Frantic and emotional, she hastily packed an overnight bag and left. I only know this because our oldest daughter was home at the time and watched her. I tried talking to her, but she was just crying, distraught, and didn't speak. She said she was almost in a panic. She's not responding to any of our texts or calls. I contacted her parents right away, and they eventually responded, saying that my wife is safe with them and to please be patient and understanding. That's it. I tried contacting her sister, her brother, and one of her close work friends. Her brother said he knew nothing, and her work friend said she was at work in the morning, then gone by lunch 3 days ago. That's all she knew. That's it. 3 days now, no contact from my wife, not even with the kids, nothing. No one is telling us anything, and here I am with my 3 girls trying to manage without her. The kids keep asking me what's going on, asking what happened with mom, and all I can say is that she's at her parents' and we're supposed to be patient and understanding. I have an overwhelming urge to just pack up the kids quickly and drive over there without warning. It's only 3 hours away. Sitting here in limbo is awful. The kids think we had a huge fight and are divorcing, but that's farthest from the truth. We never fight. The kids know this. I don't know what's going on, but can someone provide some clarity from a logical perspective? My current emotional state has me thinking in circles while I try to manage everything without her. If someone passed away, wouldn't your spouse be the first person you'd tell? Maybe some past trauma was brought to life, but again, if it were me, my wife would be the first person I'd come to for support. We know nothing. Nothing makes sense. I don't know what to do, and I just sit here in limbo with my girls. We all know nothing, and no one is telling us anything, and it has me worried, scared, angry, etc. Just about any emotion one can feel in this situation. Can anyone come up with something reasonable? Why would you ghost your family like this? Update 1. I'm not very familiar with Reddit yet. Apologies. Not much to post. I don't know how to link my last post. Just not 100% sure how to do that. It was a long night last night. I didn't sleep, and forgive me for the short update. I don't anticipate spending much time on the computer today, but I did read every post yesterday and into the night, and we eventually read responses today. I'll just say what I know and leave it at that. My father-in-law didn't call me last night, so I did eventually end up contacting the police, and they did a wellness check, as many of you suggested. This caused a storm of issues that I won't get into, but my wife has been having an affair for at least 2 years now, likely longer. Everyone was correct. The other man apparently had a heart attack on Tuesday and eventually passed away that night for certain. My mother-in-law, and it sounds like probably my sister-in-law, have known about it and have been covering for her. Still no contact from my wife, not to me or the girls. I'm trying to keep this from them for now. Honestly, no idea what to do from here. That's all I know, and that's enough to just about be the end of me. Thank you for all of the help/advice. Not sure how to move on from this news, but that's it. If you pray, please pray for me and us. Update 2. I've been recommended this sub by a few others. Just joined and have been reading through many posts when I have time, mostly at night when the chaos of the day ends, and then, of course, the brain takes over and I go through these fits of depression. Then I get hit with raging anger, then both at the same time. Sleeping is nearly impossible. Then I wander through the day like a zombie. I'm trying to learn all of the acronyms, I guess. D-Day for me was Friday. My wife was having what I initially thought was a 2-year affair, but now it seems very likely it was longer. The man she cheated with, AP, was someone she's known for a while. He tragically passed away of a heart attack, which triggered the revelation. I'm still digging for information with the help of my oldest daughter. Lots of things I'm not ready to post about. I really had no plans of continuing to make posts about my situation, but so many people have offered so much help/advice. It's almost become therapeutic. It hurts to know so many other people have SL or are suffering through this kind of pain. For that, I'm so sorry. I met with 2 different lawyers, both yesterday and today, to discuss options. Contacted several places regarding therapy too. But there are very long waits where I live. Trying to adhere to many suggestions others have made. Avoid alcohol, but I don't drink and never have. Self-care, workout, etc. I'd consider myself in very good shape for someone my age, but hard to find the energy to work out right now. I know many of you will ask me for details. The who's, what's, when's, why's, and such, but please understand that I'm just not ready to get into all of that yet. Every day seems like a new bomb has exploded, and I'm just looking for advice on one thing so I can maybe start sleeping a little. My wife was everything to me. My best friend since high school, the mother of my 3 beautiful daughters. I mean, we have inside jokes and secret handshakes. It's all gone. Everything. It's just all gone. I think about all of our years together, every milestone, every laugh, and now I just get so very depressed. It's crippling. It's as though it all meant nothing to her, and now my future will be without her. And then, of course, the how could she creeps in, and I get overcome with this unquenchable, raging anger. I scream into my pillow and punch the mattress until my arms cramp. It's a horrible cycle. I only sleep out of pure exhaustion. Then I'll wake up suddenly, and the mind games begin anew. Any energy I do have, I dedicate to my girls, who've been trying to take care of me like they're the parents. It's not fair to them. How did you all sleep after you found out about the affair? How did you manage the silence and the emptiness at night with only your thoughts? I've decided that, outside of my daughters, sleep needs to be my #1 priority in all of this, but I just can't. So hoping you can help. Thank you all. Update 3. Apologies for still being relatively new to Reddit. Not sure how much of my situation I'm supposed to repeat or reiterate, but it's been just over a week since my D-Day, and since the day I learned my wife's affair was well over 4 years. Still no exact timeline. Very likely it started emotional and then turned physical. I'm curious how the pandemic and lockdowns played into this too, questions I may or may not get the answers to. Anyway, yesterday my in-laws made an impromptu visit to see their grandkids. My wife has been crashing at their house since this nightmare began, which is complete and total crap, of course. As they spent all of 15 minutes greeting the girls, my wife and I have 3 daughters, before asking to speak with me in private. It was a long conversation, as you might expect, one which I don't want to dialogue in its entirety on this post, but long story short, my wife wants to come home, but she fears the backlash of her actions and is afraid to face what she's done. Her parents also dug very hard trying to determine whether or not I planned on divorcing and spent considerable time trying to sway me toward forgiving my wife and trying to rebuild the marriage. It was clear they were very ashamed and embarrassed, but also clear they wanted my wife out of their house. It was a very civil and respectful exchange. I admit I lied and told them I wasn't sure what my future plans were, as I fully plan on divorcing, but I feel if I reveal this, I'll never get the truth from my wife. And I may never get it, but I want her to sit in front of me and explain it all if possible. Over 17 years of marriage and being together since high school, 3 kids, countless memories, and all that we've shared, I want her to look me in the eyes and tell me everything. I also want my kids to know that I gave her a chance to explain herself, that I gave her the opportunity to apologize and handle things together as mature adults. I keep trying to choose the path that will set the best example for my kids. I don't know. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Legally, I cannot keep my wife out of our home. My lawyer made that very clear. So if my wife is going to come home, I can't stop her, though I absolutely do not want this right now. My girls and I have actually started to settle into a nice routine, so I made a demand that I felt would be unachievable for a while. I said my wife could come home when she sat down with me in person, looked me in the eyes and revealed everything about her affair, start to finish, answering all of my questions without hesitation or further deceit, and then sat down with the girls and apologized in person and answered their questions too. Figured since they already know, it's only fair. Again, she can legally come home whenever she wants and doesn't have to adhere to any demands. But if she's afraid to face us, maybe I could use that to our advantage. Is that wrong? I'm not trying to be devious or deceptive here. I just really don't want to start cohabitating yet. If I can delay it, there is a mandatory 90-day waiting period in our state before divorce can happen anyway. Her coming home is inevitable. We'll both have to go back to work eventually, and life will go on regardless of this mess. I'd just like to prolong it so I can plan and get into a better state of mental/emotional health. My wife has been texting the girls, and she claims that she doesn't want a divorce and keeps apologizing to them repeatedly. They've shown me the texts, asks about me daily, and the reality of what she's done to all of us is hitting her hard, especially in the last couple of days. How do I manage this? Was my demand foolish? It sounds like my wife is going to be coming home sooner than later anyway. I feel confident in my path forward right now. I'm not rattled by this as I knew it would happen eventually. I just want to make the best decision for my daughters and then myself as we move forward. Thank you to each and everyone that's been offering encouragement, advice, and support. Update 4. This will be rather anticlimactic, but apologies for the length. I just need to get this out. Terrible weekend, but my wife came home yesterday. A decent amount of build-up to it as this week went on. Any prior time she'd first enter the doorway, I'd give her a hug and kiss, but this time there was just this horribly uncomfortable awkwardness between us. She actually came to me and tried to give me a hug before saying anything, but I turned away. Unreal. Just as if nothing had happened. After she settled, I naturally asked her to tell me everything, and she again reiterated that she's not ready. We had spoken on the phone earlier in the week. Same result. I insisted that the only condition of her moving back home was that she loved the family enough to explain why she's been absent for going on 3 weeks. But she just repeated that she just wasn't ready for that. It took a lot to not scream at her, but I took a couple of deep breaths and tried to compose myself. I failed, and after the first of many very long pauses, I just blurted out that she'd been having an affair for over 4 years with this coworker of hers, planned on leaving me for this other man, ghosted her whole family, and now walks through the door without fulfilling the one single condition that I had asked for, and that I wanted a divorce. I guess this is when things got weird. Her body language and facial expression made it obvious she had no idea how much I knew about her affair. She glanced at me wide-eyed, then just stood there in the kitchen staring at the floor, said nothing, just stoic. I was expecting anything, everything but this. Maybe an emotional tirade, maybe a tearful confession. Maybe she'd start screaming at me, yelling, blaming the affair on me, maybe a serious-toned, okay, let's sit down and talk this out, but not this reaction. We honestly must have stood in the kitchen for 5 minutes in absolute silence. It was just the strangest moment I've ever experienced. She clearly didn't know what to say, and neither did I. I had read all of your comments and advice on my situation. I even took notes. I sat in front of a mirror and had prepared myself for all possible scenarios that this confrontation might present, except this one. So I eventually decided right then and there to map out everything I knew about her affair. Maybe dumb of me. Proceeded to tell her everything that I knew, admittedly adding in my own assumptions about several things. How she met AP, her sister's involvement, what went on during COVID, etc. She just stared at the floor the entire time. I got angrier as I went along because she said nothing, but I did everything I could not to raise my voice or get obscene. I finally composed myself. Then there was another lengthy, awkward silence. Then anger switched to sadness at the realization of everything. I then softly asked her what I did to push her away. Did she ever love me, and was her AP worth it? She said nothing. Didn't budge, didn't move, just nothing from her at all. No tears, no apology, no yelling, no explanation. Just stood there with her head down, nothing. This hurt. This hurt maybe worse than D-Day did. I stood there staring at her. Not sure I would have moved, but then things got worse, of course. Our girls were eavesdropping on the entire encounter. I'm just so incredibly stupid. I've been dedicating so much energy into putting them first, in their needs, over the past couple of weeks, but I got emotional and didn't give a single thought to their whereabouts once I confronted my wife. So our oldest daughter stormed downstairs and lashed out. A lot of pent-up anger on her part. My wife quickly just ran upstairs and locked the bedroom door. That's where we're at now. I heard my wife crying most of the night last night until I fell asleep. Only our youngest has tried talking to her. The rest of us have avoided her. If I can get the courage up, I'm going to suggest she stay with her sister until we're able to finalize the divorce. But this is still her home too. It's just going to be miserable if we all have to cohabitate with her. I was wrong about my wife and all of you were correct. I was wrong about all of our years together, wrong about all of the memories, the life-changing moments. I was convinced she'd drop to her knees and beg for forgiveness. I was so convinced that she would reap everything from the last 4 years and unload the truth to absolve her guilt. This woman literally drove back to a farmer's market once when she realized she'd been given $10 too much in change. But we're not worth it to her. I'm not worth it to her. Maybe I never was. Now what? What? Today was so uncomfortable at home. The girls and I tried to carry on as we had for the past 2 weeks, but obviously that's not possible. I just want to fast forward past all of this. Past the divorce, past the awkward conversations, past the inevitable arguments/fights, past the drama. To those that have had to cohabitate with their WS, how did you manage that, especially with kids? I know this is just the beginning. I keep reading all of the posts that promise it gets better, but I'm so far away from that. There's not a single moment when I don't want to scream right now. Trying very, very, very hard to maintain a stable mind for the girls, of course, but don't know if I can keep it up for 3 months. School will start well before all of this is over too. I guess this is my life now. Thank you all for taking such a vested interest in me. I don't know if the worst is ahead or behind us, but I appreciate any/all you can offer to get me through the next phase. Update 5. I'm in a bad way, and I've been in a bad way since my WW came home. Since I learned of her affair, I've been trying to fake it as best as possible for my daughters. I try to say the right things, think the right things, but tonight I have to admit the truth. As many of you post daily, it comes in waves, but I was hit with a big one tonight and lost my composure a bit. Divorce is filed, but my WW still has yet to hire a lawyer, and again, I'm trying to be as patient and delicate in this regard as possible, as I'm starting to see hope for an uncontested divorce that we mainly handle mostly ourselves. But after tonight, I don't know. We've been cohabitating during the week, and WW goes to her sister's Friday nights and returns home Sunday nights, as she works very close to our family home. But her sister is an hour away if there's no traffic. For the past couple of weeks, it's been this routine of mostly avoidance, as myself and the girls are trying to carry on normally while WW kind of just stays to herself, though there are casual interactions every evening, except that my oldest daughter and my WW aren't speaking after a couple of bad blow-ups. It's for the best right now. Lately, I've been heeding much of all of your advice, along with things I've read. I work very hard on my self-discipline around my wife, and though it takes all my strength and willpower, I've been short and indifferent toward her when we briefly talk, though always polite and respectful, until tonight. Last couple of Fridays, she's come home from work, gotten a few things together, and taken off for her sister's for the weekend before I'm even home from work. But not tonight. She was waiting in the kitchen for me when I got home tonight. I tried to just walk past, but she lightly grabbed me by the hand and asked me if this is how I was going to treat her just because she's not ready to talk to me about her affair. Which, by the way, is the very first time she so much as mentioned a single word about her cheating since this all blew up almost a month ago. I tried. I promise you I tried to just bite my tongue and walk away, but our daughters weren't home at the time, and rage built up in me, and then I unloaded my every vice and every pain, every hurt, ache, rage, misery. I unloaded everything on her. I can't even tell you how long I went on. Lost all concept of time. I did raise my voice at times, got a little animated and loud. I just broke down and told her how broken I am. The agony that I'm in every day. Everything I've been holding back. Everything that's been tormenting me. I mean, I could make this post 4,000 words long if I tried to recount everything I said. Once I started, I wasn't going to stop, of course. I cried, got emotional again. I was so freaking angry at myself afterward. I've been doing so well, damn it. She got to me. I let her get to me. I knew it would happen. I knew it. Disgusting. It's been building for a while, and there's only so much I can vent into the void. Well, also for the first time, WW actually broke down and got emotional, surprisingly. Started sobbing uncontrollably. Regrettably, this made me happy to see her hurting in the same way that I was. I wish that I didn't care, but there was some satisfaction in seeing her break down finally. Like there is actually someone in there with an ounce of compassion. Also, surprisingly, she mumbled apologies repeatedly during my explosion. She was kind of ugly crying, and that's all she would say is, "I'm so sorry," but in the end, I left the kitchen before she could compose herself enough to say anything else. Told her to please leave me alone. So that happened. She lingered around the kitchen for a while before leaving again for her sister's house. The girls got home about a half hour later and knew something had happened. Hard to hide it, but I wasn't ready to talk about anything and don't think they need to know about this. Do they? The two youngest have been doing much better, and I don't want to hinder their progress. And telling my oldest about this would just add more fuel to her fire, which I also don't want. I hate this so much. I hate it. I should have held it together. I should have just given my WW the cold shoulder and walked right past her. I don't know. Now thinking back, it feels like she was just trying to start a conversation about her affair, but didn't know how and obviously didn't get very far because I exploded. I've started to actually worry about her. I know many of you will criticize me for this, but I don't want her to come to any harm. She's been isolated and alone with her thoughts, with nearly everyone turning their back on her. You can say she deserves it, and that's true, but she's still a human being and the mother of my kids. What a setback for me. Really disappointed in myself. Sorry for another long rant. I called my brother and ranted to him too. Man, I'll try to start again Monday. I'm only human. It actually felt good to vent on her. But now, of course, the regret is hitting me. Should I text my wife or just leave it be? I'm such a mess, but thanks for listening. Thanks for offering me the support I need to get through all of this. And thank you for all of the advice in the midst of the chaos. We have all started therapy, so that's something. But this is so incredibly hard. Just so hard. Update 6. I know many of you have reached out to me, and I do appreciate the concern. Most of you were correct. Things aren't great, and I haven't had the chance to get online at all. Wanted to maybe take a break from the internet, but this week has me backpedaling horribly. It's just been awful. My wife hasn't really left me alone all week. Overly nice and continually apologizing for her affair, sobbing, and then smothering me, knocking on my door at night wanting to talk. I've ignored her some but talked when I was in the mood. I finally snapped at her Wednesday night, telling her to leave me alone. Then last night it happened. Just over a month since my soon-to-be ex-wife came back home after her affair blew up, and now as things have entered this uncomfortable cohabitating routine, she came into my room after the girls went to bed and asked to talk with me in private. Differently than she'd been approaching me all week. I hesitated at first, but eventually we actually went to the garage and sat in my car so as not to make the mistake of confrontation in front of the kids again. This is lengthy. Apologies. She told me everything according to her. We were out there for almost 3 hours. I don't know how much to share. I was up all night. Listened to her sobbing again for several hours. Couldn't sleep. I cried too. Then I'd get super angry and have to resist going into a scream at her, then cry, then anger, and on and on. Forgive me if I take a day or so to respond to anyone, but I need to get this off my chest and then try to sleep. It hasn't helped having my WW constantly apologizing and begging me for another chance all evening tonight too. Had to leave for a few hours just to get away from her. It is just so painful to be around her. Anyway, she was introduced to her AP by her sister well before COVID, dating back about 5 years, apparently with zero romantic intentions, but he was a higher-up at a company she wanted to work for and currently does, and he gave her an in. So her desire to change jobs was not based on her affair, but once she did change jobs, obviously she had extra incentive. Once she got the job, AP began flirting with her. Started out as texting, then pictures and more texting, then became physical just before COVID hit. She confessed to her sister and wanted to come clean to me then, but decided to bury it and say nothing, of course. My wife said she went in see with her AP soon after, but as long as lockdowns and restrictions were lifted, he reached back out to her, and she resumed talking to him until the physical side to the affair started up again once businesses went back to work. She claims to have ended the affair a couple of times out of guilt but kept going back to him, so it never ended, essentially. She actually included a lot of details, had a 5-page packet of handwritten notes of her affair timeline, read off the entire thing, answering questions along the way. She lied about weekend trips with the girls. She lied about traveling for work. She lied about traffic jams, about issues with her parents, about shopping trips, etc. Just as I suspected, and the list was extensive. So many lies that I just trusted her every word. Never questioned anything, but they were just a front to be with him. Hearing it all, it just made me feel worse. Everyone was correct about that, but her affection never really dipped while all of this was going on. She never got distant like I read so often. Intimacy did change, but not enough to where I'd see red flags. Anyway, she admits falling in love with AP and wanting a life with him. He was older, divorced/single, and promised her expensive things, vacations, and all the things he could do for her. She started fantasizing about escaping her responsibilities with the family and claimed the thrill of being with him as too much to resist. Talked about how bored she got with the daily routines of family life. She was incredibly candid, very emotional, and seemingly honest. I lost my composure and began crying midway through. It hurt to hear it all, as you'd expect, of course. Once she was finished with her confession, she told me how much she loved me, and always has, and that she's willing to do anything/everything to try and save the marriage. A lot of you predicted this would happen, but it all just seems so disingenuous to me, like it was rehearsed. I've been with this woman for well over half my life, and I can just tell when she's full of crap. Maybe I'm wrong. Guess it doesn't matter. But I composed myself better than last week. Still got angry and said a few not-so-nice things, including getting a jab in about how her AP was seeing multiple women, and she was just one of many that he was willing to toss aside. That seemed to really upset her. A million things have gone through my brain when thinking about this moment when she'd finally confess. All the one-liners I might throw at her or things I could say to hurt her back. Hundreds of responses that I couldn't think of in the emotional moment the other night. But one thing I knew I would ask, and that was if AP was still alive and she had to choose between him and me, who would she choose? She hesitated and then mumbled, "That's not fair." I pressed the issue and then she eventually said she'd, of course, pick me. My response was that her hesitation was the reason I was divorcing her because she was lying again. She started sobbing, and that was the last she spoke. We sat in the car a while. She just kept sobbing, but I was tired, so I just told her that we're divorcing and we owe it to the girls to get along in a civil way, to be great parents and be present in their lives. I also added that after all the pain she'd put me through, I hope she was a good enough person to divorce fairly/amicably. That would prove she actually loved me. The last thing I said to her, I stole from somewhere else online. Please understand that I'm not a petty person, and I did not purposely want to cause her pain. It just seemed a fitting end to it all, but I did 100% mean what I said, and I did. I leaned over and kissed her on the forehead and told her that I would have loved her forever, then got out of the car and went to bed. That was it. Of course, I didn't sleep last night, and here I am, unable to sleep once again tonight. Don't know what happens now. Her opportunity to contest the divorce is come and gone, so I guess that's one good thing, but I haven't talked to my lawyer yet. I find myself crying again and sinking back into those depression/anger phases. It was very hard hearing everything last night, and in reality, I could have done without it all. Now that I know she could have lied and made it all up too. Who knows? But it seemed to fit perfectly with everything I'd put together in the past month. So that's it for now. This is just never ending. It seems I have a few good days, start feeling strong again, and then something else happens. Feels like it's been months and yet only days at the same time. But I'm going to try and sleep. Imagine the love of your life, the only woman you've ever loved, ever kissed, tells you she cheated on you for over 4 years because she was bored. Didn't fall out of love, didn't grow apart, didn't have any relationship issues or dead bedroom. Nothing like that. Just because she was bored. Don't know if that makes it worse or better. Thanks for reading and helping along the way. Bad couple of nights. Very bad. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. My wife believes her betrayal doesn't matter because it happened before we got married. The time frame is important here. We have been married for 3 years. We were together as a couple for 2 years before that, so we've been together for about 5 years. 2 weekends ago, her sister got married, and of course, my wife was in the wedding party. So, as you would expect, she spent the 2 weeks prior to the wedding helping her sister get everything ready. No big deal at all. She kept me informed, and I knew this was going to happen. She took that Wednesday and Friday off of work to help her and, in fact, stayed with her 3 days. I certainly know her sister, but I barely know the guy who is now my brother-in-law. In fact, I only met him a few times, but he seems nice enough. I show up Saturday morning a few hours before the ceremony in hopes of stealing just a few minutes to see her, not wanting to intrude on the day since I know she is busy. But I hadn't seen her since Tuesday. She sees me outside of her parents' house and sends her brother out to tell me that she will come out and see me at the car, which I thought was odd, but whatever. She finally comes out and sits in the seat next to me and gives me a kiss. But instead of acting happy to see me, or whatever, she tells me that she has to talk to me, and she doesn't want it to ruin her sister's day. She informs me that at the reception, if I still want to go, I might hear some things about the best man and her, and she didn't want it to be awkward or weird. I just kind of sat there, stunned. She said that about 4 years ago she had a fling with him and that it didn't mean anything, but she was aware that, by nature, I'm somewhat jealous and she wanted me to know in advance so that if I heard something I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I just kind of sat there. This was not how I thought my morning would go. But I told her I appreciated knowing it and that it certainly wasn't a big deal. Now she went back in the house, and I went to eat lunch and decided to meet her at the church. As I'm eating and reading my phone, it dawns on me. She said she had a fling with him 4 years ago, and we've been together 5. My first reaction was to blow it off and think that she just told me the wrong time, but the more I thought about it, the more I started to remember about a year and a half of us being together. She had a phase where she was really sketchy about her behavior, wasn't available when she normally was, and went on 2 weekend camping trips that were with friends from work. Of course, I'm a little knotted up over this, but I know I have a long day ahead of me. I go to the wedding and sit there watching everything. After the wedding, they have a line that you walk by and congratulate the bride and groom, and the wedding party is standing in line as well. My wife is standing with some other guy. I don't know him at all, but the best man was there. I just went down the line and acted like no big deal. I get to the reception, and it takes forever for them to come because of photos. She finally gets there and sits with me. I decided not to say anything, as I didn't want to distract from the day. But instead of just letting it go, she then tells me that each of the groomsmen and bridesmaids are going to dance and that she is going to be dancing with him. I asked why, when she was not his partner for the party, and she said that the maid of honor and her partner were actually married and wanted to dance with each other. At this point, I'm a little more than perturbed, but I try and not let it show. Thankfully, I was smart enough not to drink because I freely admit I'm an angry drunk, so I know when not to even partake. She talks to everyone around her, and then the dance comes, and he comes over and extends his arm, and she gets up. I try not to watch and, in fact, make it a point not to. She comes back with him in tow, and they're joking like the best of friends. She decides that it would be a good idea to introduce us, and while I didn't say anything, my greeting to him was probably not cordial. But it did not deter him from sitting and talking with her for a few minutes. The more they sat and talked and reminisced about old times and places, the madder I got. Eventually, I got up and went to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was gone. She decided to tell me that she thought I was rude, which was not what I was all about hearing at the moment. I told her that this wasn't the time or place to talk about it, but rest assured, we would talk later. She sat there and then said that she was going to change clothes, and as soon as she got back, she was telling her sister that we were leaving because I had ruined her day, but she didn't want me to ruin her sister's day as well. I told her that I was perfectly capable of not being a bother to her or her sister the rest of the day, and that I did not want to be the cause of any drama, so I would prefer to just stay. She went and changed clothes and then came back all in a huff. Now understand, I have not said a word to her. I even shook the other guy's hand. I guess I just looked miserable, so that is what she was basing this off of. She was adamant about not staying, and so I said that if she really wanted to go, we could go. But if she would rather stay, I would be happy to stay, or if she would like, since I came in my own car, I would leave so she could stay. She at first said that we should stay, but then said if I couldn't act any better, I should leave. I asked how I was acting, and she said it was obvious I was trying to be like a silverback gorilla wanting to fight. I didn't know whether to laugh in her face or be offended. I went back in and sat down while she mingled with the other guests. I talked with her brother for a while, but then ultimately ended up back at our table talking with her grandma. We leave at the same time, and I arrived home just before she did. I was sitting in the living room waiting on her when she came in and did not beat around the bush. I simply asked her to retell me the story about this other guy, and she said it word for word like before. After sitting and looking at her for a time, I just said, "Are you sure about the time frame?" And she said she was. I then reminded her that we had been together for 5 years, so this fling was well over a year into our being together. What happened next I can't really put into words. Instead of being flustered or denying or anything, she simply said, "I know." So I asked her to explain, and she tells me that they worked together and that it was just a physical thing, and she felt like we weren't in a great place at the time and that she never had any feelings for him and never had any real intentions of leaving me. She just was having some fun for a few weekends. She said that it was probably a mistake on her part to tell me now, but she didn't want me to get blindsided. I did not take this the way she thought I would. I guess we had a very large argument and ended when she told me I was being a child about all of this, that we were married and this happened way before that, and our life together now has nothing to do with him or that time. Well, 2 things. 1, I adamantly disagree. This has a bearing on us. She cheated on me and doesn't even have the goddamn decency to feel guilty about it. 2, I hate being told I am childish when I get upset over something. It pisses me off to no end because that is her way of acting superior to me. I told her I needed time to think, and she told me there was nothing to think about. We loved each other, and this didn't change anything. That was 2 weeks ago, and I still am not over it. She has been trying the past few days to get me to talk to her, but I admit that, for whatever reason, I'm not viewing her the same as I did before. Part of me is like, this is stupid. It happened a few years ago, and we are married now, and there hasn't been any problems at all. But then part of me is like, I just found out she cheated on me, and it hurts like hell, and what makes it worse is that instead of trying to understand how I feel, she is trying to guilt me into just not even thinking about it. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry for the length. I probably should have cut out some of the wedding stuff, but it all came out at once. Update 1, me, 25M. With my wife, 23F. She informs me at her sister's wedding she had slept with the best man. First, I want to clarify something from my first post that I really did not spell out very well. It doesn't have any real bearing on anything, but for some reason, it bugs me that I made this part sort of murky. The maid of honor, not my wife, was married to the groomsman who my wife walked down the aisle with. There were some people who felt my wife was trying to arrange the dance, but I do know for a fact that this part was legit. However, it doesn't mean she didn't try to offer to let them dance or any other form of manipulation, but I just wanted to try and clear that part up a little. I'm here because I have gotten honest to God over 40 requests for an update since last week. Thank you for your guys' concern on this, and I wish I had some really ballsy statement to make about how I stood tall and kicked her to the curb, but sadly, that is just not what happened. To be blunt, I'm in limbo. There have been developments, but all they have done is make it harder for me to decide. Last week I was mostly angry. Then, as the weekend progressed, I became mostly sad. I want to be able to hate her and flip that switch that tells me I'm being walked on and I'm a sucker, but it's just very hard for me to do that because I still love her, and this is ripping me apart. Here is what has happened of any consequence. She finally came to the realization that I was not going to just get over this. This then brought her to the realization that I might want out of the marriage. This then brought on a near nervous breakdown from her. A lot of people from the first post stated that she would try and manipulate me like that, and believe me, I was taking those words to heart when I thought she was having crocodile tears, but it soon became apparent to me that she wasn't acting or faking. She was having a legitimate panic attack. This led to an ER visit, and that led to an overnight stay in the hospital, and then to new medications and a scheduled follow-up with her doctor for later next week. This brought her family into it, and that in turn led to long conversations all the way around when we got home with her family in tow. I asked what she wanted to do since there was a house full of people, and she said she wanted to be with her mom for a while. That was fine with me, as I had no desire to hang around all day with her dad or sister. So I said I was going to go finish up something at work and would be home later. 2 hours after I get there, I get a text from her begging me to please come home and that she really needs me to talk with her. So I finish up what I was doing and head home. I am greeted on my own front porch by her dad, who asks if he can talk to me for a minute. My anger level was already somewhat high, but I was ready to go to war if she had dumped a sack of lies on me with her dad. I mean, it's not like he and I are best friends, but I've never had a bad moment with him. so I really wasn't going to be happy about being the bastard who broke his baby's heart. We sat on our deck chairs, and he floored me with his opening salvo. I was expecting to hear anything but what he said. He said that she told them what had happened and that he wanted to apologize to me because he said that he felt like he did a really shitty job as a parent and that this mindset that she had was really a creation of her mother's, and that while he loved both of them, he said they were wrong, and he had told his wife years ago that telling the girls that whatever happens before marriage doesn't count was a horrible idea and value system to install in them. He then said that he wasn't there to stand up for what his daughter did, but he just wanted me to be aware that what she was saying and how she was acting was simply because she honestly believed that being married was an entirely different life and that they, mom and dad, had romanticized marriage to the point that she wasn't understanding real life. Basically, he was kind of throwing his wife under the bus. But again, this is not what I was expecting at all. We shook hands, and he said that no matter what I decided, he still thought very highly of me, which honestly made me feel really good for that moment. I then went inside, and my wife is curled up in a ball on her mom's lap, and you can tell she has been crying the entire time I've been gone. Mom gets up and comes and hugs me and tells me she is sorry, and that she loves me, and she is praying that we can work this out. My wife is laid out on the couch at this point. Her mom and dad leave, and she sits there looking at me and crying. Okay, hey, this is where I'm gonna piss off everybody and just tell you that I couldn't take it. I went to her and we hugged for a long time, with her telling me over and over how sorry she was. Hey, I know it was the weak thing to do, but again, I have to say in my defense that just before this incident occurred, I loved her with all of my heart and would have done anything to not see her in pain. Whatever she had done, I still didn't want to see her like that. Look, it's very possible that she was putting on an Oscar-worthy acting job, but I don't honestly think so. She really seemed broken at that point in time. After a while, when she calmed down, I asked her what she wanted me to come home and talk about, and she said she wanted to get everything out in the open so I didn't feel like I was being lied to or manipulated. So she wanted me to ask her questions, and I wish I had written down a list, but I came up with a few off the top of my head. She was brutally honest with me, and some of the questions I asked I probably shouldn't have because now the mental image is stuck in there, but honestly, was there any way I just now have confirmation? First, I asked for dates or at the very least approximate dates. I didn't tell her about the engagement concern I had because I didn't want her to change stories, and she remembered exactly when they occurred. Fortunately, this happened a little earlier in our relationship than she told me initially, and so we were not engaged when this happened. I can't tell you what a relief it was because I became physically ill when I thought about that when someone said it in my last post. Second, I asked how many times she went overboard with this because instead of just telling me how many different dates, she decided to tell me how many times there was penetration. She wasn't doing it to be mean. She honestly thought that is what I wanted to know. This part of the conversation did not help me any at all and, in fact, almost broke me down. In truth, it wasn't that often, and in fact, there were really only 3 different days it happened on, but there were several times during those 3 days. Then came the hard part. Why did she do it? Okay, again, I'm not the most manly of men, and I am ashamed to admit this, but I couldn't get this out without starting to cry. I asked why wasn't I good enough, why him, why did she not just leave me? It was her turn to hold me because at this point everything came rushing at me. Her telling me having to watch them laugh with each other, her now telling me how many times they did it and where they did it. She talked during this, but to this moment I have no idea what she said. I was too upset and honestly nothing she was going to say was going to make a bit of difference anyway. But after I composed myself, I simply told her that the betrayal was horrible. But honestly, her response to me when I found out was just as bad, if not worse. She agreed with me, and she apologized for calling me immature. She said that she honestly believed that it wouldn't matter to me now because we were married. When she said this, my blood started to boil again. I started to say something about it, but she jumped in and said that after talking with her parents, she now sees that this was very wrong of her and that cheating is cheating, but she still feels like our happiness that we have shared since being married should count for something. I then replied that I kind of felt like that happiness was built on a lie. This led to another breakdown on her part and almost another ER visit, but between Ativan and having her breathe into a paper sack, we got her calmed down. I let her sleep the rest of the night, feeling like emotionally we were both tired, but come Sunday we were talking again. By this time, I wasn't as sympathetic as I had been when we got home from the ER. I told her that I thought her introducing him to me was shitty, Me having to watch her dance with him was extra shitty, and the fact that she only told me because she was going to get caught was an elite level of shitty. Which then I demanded to know why did she think I would find out and how many of the people at the wedding knew besides me. Well, obviously the guy knew, but then his best friend in the world also knew. Did I mention that he is now my brother-in-law? Which then led to her sister finding out, and she was afraid her sister was going to be the one to tell me. I asked how often she sees this guy, and she said that the wedding is the first time she has seen him in 3 years. Then I lost my shit and asked her if she saw him during any of the lead-up to the wedding. She got all pissy about it, acting like she wouldn't see anyone because she was married, and I just lost my shit and had to leave for a while because once again I felt like she was living on Married Planet or some such in the world. There is a different place then for the rest of us. I finally got cooled off enough to come home and try and be civil about things. She finally asked me what she could do to help me get past all of this, which may not sound like much, but it was the first time she offered to help me really, so it was at least a nice gesture. I told her I wasn't sure what she could do or if there was anything either of us could do and that I may never get over this. She said that she wanted to help because she didn't want to see me in pain, and that over the years she hopes I'll be able to judge her based on who she is now. She would do anything I wanted to work this out. She also wanted to be sure that I knew that she has been 100% faithful since we've been married and would never cheat on her vows. I sarcastically thanked her, which I admit wasn't the most mature thing to do. I then asked for a moratorium from further talks until at least Wednesday. I have 2 projects I have to get done, and honestly, I'm just exhausted and have no clue what I want to do. I shift between periods of red-hot anger where I want to kick her out and then periods of deep emotional turmoil where I want to just forget this and move forward with her. Yes, I know this is not what anyone wanted to hear, and no, I'm not proud to type it, but it is what it is at the moment. Update 2, me, 25M. With my wife, 23F. She informs me at her sister's wedding she had slept with the best man. I've been absolutely overwhelmed by the responses I have received over this. I have gotten over 400 private messages, and I just cannot respond to all of them, or any of them anymore, as it would take me a week to do that. I want to thank all of you who have written to me and those of you who this struck a chord with. All I can say is that I'm sorry you had to go through this as well. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. I do want to say one thing though. The vast majority of the people contacting me via PM were all afraid to bring up their point of view in the open for fear of being harassed. I have honestly taken both points of view into consideration, and there has been some great advice and some not so great, but I think people's hearts are in the right place. I just wish that if people disagreed with each other, they wouldn't feel the need to demonize a person because of a point of view. Okay, for the hundreds of you that have been clamoring for an update, here it is. As you know, I asked to just drop it until last night so I could focus on a job-related item I had to get done. She kept her word about it, but I could tell she was very emotional and honestly nervous. She is taking some strong benzodiazepines for her anxiety, but even as strong as it is, I can still see how anxious she had been. I wasn't intentionally trying to punish her. In fact, quite the opposite. I really was trying to give her a break as much as me. But she told me last night that not holding her or showing any real affection towards her was almost torture to her. Well, last night finally arrived, and we had what my dad always called a come-to-Jesus meeting. I got home from work, and I brought dinner so there would be no distractions of cleanup or anything. We started talking around 6 o'clock and finally ended around 2 o'clock. In that time frame, we laid out a lot of issues that have been present and what, or if we are both willing to do to move forward. Long story short, starting today, I'm living with my brother for the next few days/weeks. Not sure. She is understandably upset by all of this, and I am making an effort to communicate openly with her, so she does not feel abandoned or neglected. If you're wondering how we got from talking to me living with my brother, here it is in a nutshell. I know this is not going to make several of you very happy, but here is where I'm going with this. I want to save my marriage, but I can't do it living what I feel was somewhat a lie. I know she never intended to lie once we were married, but when I sat down and thought about this one question, would I have stayed with her if I had known at the time she did this? Each and every time I answered no. So, to me, she took away my ability to choose whether or not I wanted to continue, and we built the next few years based on the foundation of something that wasn't quite true. However, the truth is we still built something. Sometimes foundations can be repaired, and sometimes you have to tear them down to build new ones. This is what I'm hoping to do. I'm hoping to shake things up enough for both of us so that we can start over. Like I said in the very first post, our marriage until this point had been what I would consider to be perfect, or as perfect as any one thing can be, but there were some very troubling things that occurred due to this, and here is a brief synopsis of our talk. I laid out the fact that while I absolutely was upset about the cheating, and yes, I still consider it cheating, which she has now come to realize that this is the way it is and is going to be considered, I was equally upset by her lack of consideration for my feelings on this. I told her that I resented being told I was immature and a child for something that, objectively speaking, I had every right to be upset about. Her response was to apologize and tell me she was in the wrong and that while she admits fault and sees what I'm saying, that at the time she had convinced herself that because we were married that I was wrong to be upset about something that happened beforehand, but she now sees where this is wrong. I then told her that I felt very disrespected by her associating with this guy right in front of me and that I felt humiliated having to shake his hand. Her response was to once again apologize, and she said that in her mind at the time she felt like she was trying to show me that there was nothing there. She said she felt like if she avoided him or acted shady around him that I would be more upset. I told her she was wrong. She said that out of all of the things, this is the one that has hit her the most in the face because even her sister has told her how poor this was for her to do to me, and she was deeply hurt by this because it had hurt me, which she never wanted to do. I then talked about her lack of remorse over being with someone else while we were together. Her only response was to say that she was very sorry. How that at the time she just used very poor judgment, and if she could go back and change the past she would. Then came the talk that got the most discussion. How I felt like she really wasn't sorry for anything, but that she was just sorry that I didn't just shrug my shoulders and say that everything was going to be okay. That there were going to be repercussions for what I consider to be an act of betrayal and then an act of not caring about me. I'll give her full credit here. She was brutally honest about this. And at least she was, so we didn't have to spend hours trying to work our way around it. She admitted that when we got home after the event, she started to realize that I wasn't going to let this go. And then as time went on, she knew that this was an issue. Her first instinct was to be mad at me for being mad at her, but then realized, even from her own point of view, how stupid that was. But again, she had it beat into her head that she was my wife and that I should easily forgive and forget something that happened way before we were married. She also admitted that when it became real, she frankly outright panicked thinking about losing her marriage. Nobody on either side of her family is divorced, so she could be the first, and she admitted to that being a big factor in her panic attack. But as the week has progressed and she has spoken more to her family, she is seeing that what she has put in her mind about marriage isn't the end-all be-all she thought it was. She also did really feel bad about bringing the guy around to me. However, you will notice, which I did too, that she never said she felt guilty about being with him. Now I want everyone to know this as well. What I have given you from above is a brief synopsis of events. She sounds like a robot in this version. And believe me, she was not. There were lots of tears. Real honest tears. I've seen her oh woe is me tears before, so I know the difference. There were a few curse words, and there were even moments of pleading and begging. As I said, this went on for 8-ish hours, so by the time we were done, she was physically exhausted. I have set out the following steps if we are to reconcile, and it is totally up to her if she wants to stay together. She is very, very adamant about staying together, by the way. I don't care how illogical it seems. She is to never have contact with him again. This is an absolute for me and a deal breaker, and I was absolutely clear on this. We have to have couples therapy. While I am living with my brother, we are still legally married, and this is not an invitation or excuse for either of us to see anyone else again. Deal breaker in a second, if either of us uses this as an excuse. Believe me, I will not, and I don't believe she will either. We start over to a point. I have to view her differently now. Even if I didn't want to, I can't just forget that she chose to cheat. So that's where we are now. I know that is not what some of you wanted, but ultimately, I have to go with what I believe will make me happiest in the long run. My head says be aware, and I am going to guard my heart for a long time, but my heart is still in love with her. We are going out on a date Friday night, which she is really looking forward to. I have no idea how long I will be with my brother. Hell, I may not make it past Friday, but if nothing else, I feel like I have some control here, which I felt prior to the talk. I had almost none. In the end, I held her for a long time and we slept together. I do not want a broken woman right now. That is kind of what she is. I want her to be my partner for life, but I do want her to know that to be a partner, she has to equally care about my feelings as I do hers. P.S. I had to do some real hard thinking about my new brother-in-law. Again, I've only met him a few times and he seems like a nice enough guy, but at the end of it all, he certainly was aware of the issue. But just to keep peace in the family, I'm gonna not make a stink about him because that will certainly make every holiday tough going forward. As long as he never mentioned the incident or the guy ever again to or around me, I can live with it. Additional info. Sorry, I guess I kind of forgot to address this. It's not going to make anyone happy, but here goes. The truth is she knew perfectly well that what she did was cheating. She has never denied that. However, what she did do was think that being married was like crossing the finishing line and that basically she got by with it. She hid it because she knew if I knew, it would be over. However, where her shock was that if I knew it after being married, that I would still think of it as a big deal and ultimately could end the marriage. I'm not sure if I was plain enough, so let me rephrase. She damn well knew it was wrong and that it would have ended us if I ever found out about it. However, she thought that repercussion ended when we got married. She genuinely was shocked that I still was counting it as cheating because it did not happen in the confines of holy matrimony. Yes, believe it or not, even though she did this and has some other issues that would make you scratch your head, she is devoutly Christian, as you can tell I am not. So while I think it's a crock, there is a very certain religious aspect into what she sees as marriage. Update 3. Thank you all who keep sending me messages of encouragement and wondering what has happened. For those of you who have asked me to give you an update, here is a brief one. I've been staying with my brother for a little over a month. I cannot say enough nice words about him. He has bent over backwards to help me, and I've come to appreciate him in a whole new way. Growing up, we were close, but never really close, if you know what I mean. This has shown me that our bond is much stronger than I ever imagined it was. The big news is that I have delivered her with divorce papers. Now, before those of you who wanted me to dump her jump for joy, let me explain something. I went to a divorce lawyer and explained everything, including the fact that I did not want to go through with the divorce but wanted everything in place just in case. He drew up a divorce decree and made 3 copies. One he kept on file, one for her, and one for me. I decided to take the paperwork to her myself because I knew she would be upset, and I wanted to explain to her what was happening. I gave her the paperwork in a manila envelope and explained what it was before she opened it. I also made very clear to her that I was not going to do anything with it unless we both failed to meet the conditions we both agreed upon. I explained that I was committed to us, but I really needed to see that we were headed in the right direction and that this was only there as a standby in case she didn't think I was serious. Well, this did not go over as well as I had hoped. In retrospect, this was a mistake on my part. She had been doing everything in her power prior to that to live up to the agreement. We had been out on several dates prior to this that were great for both of us. In other words, my timing sucked. My intention was good, but it did make it look like I was not acknowledging the steps she was taking to make this work. This led to another giant anxiety attack that we could not get under control with her meds. So off to the ER we went again. This time they gave her a shot and sent her home, and we both agreed that we would keep her family out of it this time. I stayed with her for 2 days just to make sure she was okay. This, of course, came up in our counseling session, and well, let's just say that I came across looking like a manipulative asshole, which, again, in retrospect, I was. I ended up taking my copy and her copy and tearing it up in front of her. She doesn't know there is a 3rd copy, but I plan on having him discard that as well. So now I pretty much feel like a monster because the look on her face when she got the divorce papers was something I never want to see again. She was so happy to see me that day, and then I gave her that and an instant combination of sadness and terror. Other than that bump in the road, things have actually been going very well. Well enough, in fact, that I am moving back home this weekend. My brother has been great, but I'm cramping his style no matter what he says. It's been fun playing Xbox every night, though. I won't deny it. But mostly, I'm going home because she has done everything I have asked of her, and I have put her through hell. I think she's paid a steep enough price, and I know she knows how serious this was. Also, in case I didn't mention this before, I do love her. She made a very stupid, selfish mistake, but it was years ago, and she had been almost the perfect wife up until the discovery. So I'm sorry to disappoint many of you, and I'm sure I will once again get many PMs telling me that I am a cuckold and an embarrassment to all men. But I don't live your lives, and you don't live mine, so this should be it. There hopefully will be nothing to update going forward. We are not cured or healed by any sense of the imagination, but we are on our way, and it's just going to take time, patience, and understanding. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Toxic mom and stepdad remodeled my house, turned my room into a nursery, and called me a freeloader while trying to kick me out of the home my dad left me after he passed away. I, 18M, have just been kicked out of my own house and urgently need somebody's advice. To start with, I have never had a perfect family. My mom and dad were childless for 4 years before they got pregnant with me. I've been told that it was a miracle that my mom got pregnant since they had been trying for a long time and had lost all hope. However, once my mom found out that she was pregnant, both my parents were extremely happy and started planning for the future. This happiness was short-lived, as has been told to me by my grandma, because my parents were never really happy with each other. They have always had a lot of nasty fights, and even after my mom got pregnant with me, these fights never really stopped. All of their fights were pretty much about the same things every day. Mom hated the fact that dad gambled, and dad hated the fact that mom was drinking the whole day, even though she was pregnant with me. To compromise, dad decided to stop gambling on the condition that mom stops drinking as well, which mom initially agreed with, but she never kept her end of the deal. Dad found out that she was secretly hiding alcohol bottles around the house to take a sip here and there. At this point, he felt that she was not only endangering herself by drinking alcohol but also me. Hence, Dad gave her an ultimatum. He threatened that he would leave her if she did not stop, which apparently did not sit well with my mom. My grandma says that because of this, Mom got really pissed and started to abuse my dad verbally. She then threw a pair of scissors at my dad, which hit the corner of his eye and injured him seriously. Later, when he was rushed to the doctors, he was informed that he had a partial corneal laceration, which could be treated, but that he was extremely lucky that it did not result in permanent vision loss. This really scared my mom, and she begged my dad to not press any charges against her. She promised to change, so my dad decided to let it go. When I was finally born, I've been told that both my parents were very happy and tried their best to take care of me. However, the peace between them didn't last long. According to my grandma, my dad one day came home from work to find me crying my eyes out in my nursery, while mom was passed out on the sofa, clearly drunk. He was furious and woke her up to confront her about it, but she kept saying that motherhood is hard and that it was just one drink. He would have also called CPS on her had she not calmed him down. I wish he had, because after getting drunk, Mom started to cleverly drink only during the morning after Dad would leave so that she would not get caught later in the evening. This is why I must have spent a lot of days in hunger, because my health started to deteriorate and I was losing weight really fast. Whenever my grandma would come to visit, she would always find the house in a complete mess. There would be dirty dishes in the sink, the floor would be sticky and filthy, and the entire place would be in disarray. She would find me wearing dirty diapers or dirty clothes with my hair uncombed. Whenever she tried to talk to my mom about the state of the house or about me, my mom would become extremely defensive and ask her to mind her own business. One time when my grandma came to visit us, she realized that my mom was clearly drunk during the day since she was unable to comprehend her words and kept giggling. When grandma confronted her about it, my mom started to get angry and insisted that it wasn't a big deal. That's when my grandma decided enough was enough. She stayed with me the entire day so she could take care of me, and later when my dad was back from work, she demanded that she take care of me for a few months so he could admit my mom to a rehabilitation center. My mom tried to fight back, but my dad immediately agreed with my grandma since he too must have realized that his wife needed help. While my mother was admitted, I went to live with my grandma for a few months. Those months I spent with her were the best time in my entire life. She bathed me, read stories to me every night, cooked me healthy meals, and took me out to the park to play. I didn't even know these were things that parents were supposed to do with their children. She didn't shout at me like my mother would if I wanted to play with her. She didn't slap me if I ever broke my plate by mistake. Living with my grandma made me feel safe. My grandma slowly became more of a mother to me and has since taken care of me more than anyone ever has. I am so grateful that she is my grandma because I don't know how else I could have survived all those years. My dad would visit me all the time since he missed me a lot. He would tell me how much my mom missed me and that she could not wait to get well so she could hold me again. Honestly, I kind of dreaded going back to my parents' place. I wish that I could just stay with my grandma forever. However, in a few months, when my mother finally got sober and got her AA sobriety chip, the first thing she did was drive to my grandma's place and visit me. It was surreal seeing my mother after all these months, and I felt like I was meeting a stranger. My mother did look much better, and after she and Grandma had a talk, I was informed that I would be moving back to my parents' place later this weekend. No matter how much I cried or protested, my mom told me that she was my parent and I had no choice but to live with her. It felt painful to come back to my parents' place, which had so many bad memories. I guess the move must have mentally and emotionally affected me a lot because I started to eat a lot less and I would puke a lot. At the mere age of 5, I was diagnosed with an eating disorder. My parents did everything they possibly could to help me. They even took me for family therapy so that we could all heal from our past and move on. Slowly but surely, I started to feel better as I settled down. My parents were no longer fighting, and my mother was no longer drinking. She tried to be a more present parent, which made me start to trust her. Dad even cut down on his working hours so he could spend more time with us. However, things took a turn for the worse one afternoon when my dad and I came home from school and caught my mother cheating on him. She had the audacity to bring her affair partner into our house, and we walked in on them doing the deed. I was absolutely traumatized, and my dad was speechless for a few minutes. His whole face was red in embarrassment as my mom and her affair partner rushed to cover themselves up. He told me to go upstairs while he confronted my mother, and her affair partner ran out of the house in terror. I could hear my parents yelling at each other loudly. My mother, being the narcissist she is, blamed him for why she had been cheating, saying she felt too pressured to be perfect, and this other guy made her feel like a normal person. She told my dad how she felt like no matter what she did, he was always disappointed with her because of her mistakes. My dad yelled back that she was a coward and that he was done with her. He demanded that she move out immediately. This is when my mom started to beg him that he should not be this cruel and that he cannot do that to the mother of his son. She told him that the other guy meant nothing and that they needed to fix the marriage for the sake of me. That night, my grandma came to pick me up as my parents continued to yell at each other. She didn't say a word or two to my mother, but mostly stayed out of it. For the next 2 weeks, I stayed with my grandma while my mom and dad sorted things out at home. My mother would call me every day and pretend as if she was very concerned about me, when I knew by now that she didn't care about anyone else except for herself. I don't know if it was because my dad really genuinely loved my mom or because he was too used to their dysfunctional relationship, but in the end, he decided to stay with her on the condition that they start going for marriage counseling. However, despite my father's decision, I never saw my mother the same way ever again after catching her with the other man. I felt like I had lost all respect for her. As if things couldn't get any worse for us as a family, just 3 months after this incident, my dad was diagnosed with stomach cancer. He had severe stomach cramps one day, which made him collapse at work. Later, when he was taken to the hospital, it was discovered that his health was quickly deteriorating, and he needed to start treatment immediately. This started long days of chemotherapy and bed rest. Since my dad had to take time away from work to try to fight against the cancer, he had some money saved up, and even my grandmother was willing to help. My mom, on the other hand, was not happy with this. She would constantly complain about how draining and expensive these treatments and doctor visits were. Dad encouraged her to find a part-time job at least and would promise her about how he would go right back to his job and support her like he has always done once he recovers. Eventually, Mom didn't have a lot of choice, so she started working as a server at a local restaurant. Her shifts were long, and she would pretty much stay out until late at night while my grandma would drive my dad to and back from the hospital for his treatment. Our neighbor, who had a daughter the same age as me, offered to take me to school every day, which was a huge help for us. This is how I became friends with Shirley. She and I have been friends for a long time now since we pretty much grew up together. Shirley's parents knew about my family history, as did a lot of neighbors, since my parents were not particularly subtle with their yelling matches. So when Shirley and I became close, They started inviting me to have lunch/dinner with them as well. My dad saw no issue with this, and neither did I. However, my mom would always berate me for spending so much time at their place. She would tell me how they only saw me as a charity case and that I was nothing more than a broken toy to them. In hindsight, this might be true, but as they spent more and more time with me, I started to see how they treated me like one of their own. In fact, when Shirley's mom found out that I liked apple pie, she would make sure to always bake one for me during the week. Weekends, Shirley's dad taught me to play basketball, and we spent many evenings practicing hoops outside their garage. They sort of became like a second family to me over time. Hence, it was no surprise to anyone when Shirley and I started to date. Eventually, Shirley brought everything positive to my life, and I am grateful every day that she is still my girlfriend despite all my crazy family history. Unluckily, my mom has never really warmed up to Shirley or her family over all this time, but they have never let her dislike come in their way of treating me with affection and love. A year into fighting cancer, my dad was informed by his doctors that the chemo was not helping him anymore and that he didn't have very long to live. This news was heartbreaking for all of us, and I spent many nights crying for him. As a child, I just could not understand why I was going to be losing the only parent who genuinely loved me and struggled to come to terms with my grief. My dad spent his last months with me, Mom, and Grandma as much as he could. One morning, he just didn't wake up anymore, no matter how much I called for him, and I knew that something was wrong. I ran to tell my mom, who called 911 immediately. I can't begin to write the pain I felt when the paramedics declared that he was dead. The only comfort we had was that he had passed away peacefully in his sleep. I did not let them take my dad's body away until I was literally physically restrained by my mom as I kept crying and screaming in grief. It was only when my grandma arrived that I calmed down a bit. I couldn't imagine the grief she must have felt at that moment. The funeral happened without any issues. However, the real twist came when Dad's lawyer arrived to read his will. It was then that it was revealed that Dad had left all his money and his house to me. My mom was shocked and even asked the lawyer to show her the papers. I guess Dad knew the kind of person she was and wanted me to have his house and whatever little money was left after chemo so that I could have a decent start in life. Mom didn't like this one bit and kept asking the lawyer if she could fight this in court since the house rightfully should go to her as she was his wife. However, since my dad had changed his will long before he went into chemotherapy, it meant that he was sound of mind and well, and she didn't have any strong ground to stand on. My mom asked me what I wanted to do with the house, and I told her that I wanted to stay in the house. She told me how we could sell the house and move to a much better location, but I had just lost my dad, and this house was all I had that reminded me of him, so I obviously refused. It wasn't like she had any choice in this matter, so she continued to live in the house. I did notice that she looked extremely disappointed, but I didn't think much about it at that time. However, not even 2 months later, my mom informed me that she had met someone and that she wanted me to meet him. Finally, now imagine my surprise when I walked into the restaurant and she introduced me to none other than Andrew, the very same guy she had been caught sleeping with years ago by Dad and me. I immediately recoiled in disgust and shock as the man extended his hand to greet me. I asked my mom if this was the same guy, and she acted all surprised and told me to sit down so she could explain further. I refused to shake the guy's hand or even acknowledge him as I was furious at my mom for even thinking I would ever want to meet him. My mom began to explain how they both had reconnected after all these years and that Andrew was just an old friend who made her feel good after Dad's death. There was something in her words that just made me feel like she was lying to me. They also seemed extremely cozy with each other and kept kissing, which made me even more uncomfortable. I started to think about all those nights she came back home late at night while my dad was still alive, giving excuses that she was working overtime when she could have been very well meeting up with this guy behind our back. Throughout the evening, I kept ignoring Andrew whenever he tried to make any small talk with me. Later, my mom was pissed at me for being rude to her boyfriend and told me how disrespectful it was. I remember that she even told me that this is why she was thinking of marrying Andrew in the next few months, so hopefully I could have a positive role model in my life. I was pissed hearing this and told her that there was no way that I wanted him in my life and that if they did get married then she had to move out because I would rather live alone than with a man who had the audacity to have an affair with her while my dad was still alive. My mom threatened me that I was still underage and that she was my parent, so I have no real choice in this matter anyways. Unfortunately, she was right, and true to her words, she soon got married to Andrew, and he quickly moved into our house. Once he moved in, he made sure to remind me every day that he was the man of the house. He hated the fact that I had pictures of my dad and me in our living room, so one day after I came back from school, I discovered that he had taken those pictures down and put them in the basement. When I angrily confronted him, he told me that he and my mom needed to make a fresh start. Hence, I was only allowed to put up pictures of my dad inside my bedroom. As if this wasn't enough for me to hate him, he was also extremely controlling. He would call my mom every time her shift ended and would call her back again if she was even a minute late to reach home. Slowly, he started to do this with me as well, but I shut him down quickly. I reminded him that he was not my father in any way and that I was going to stay out as long as I wanted. I had the keys to the house anyway, so it wasn't like he could lock me out. Now, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like I was staying out to party or anything. I would simply just spend my evenings at Shirley's place or at the library where I could peacefully finish my homework and study. Throughout this time, I continued to have a good relationship with my grandma, and I visited her as much as I could. We would simply sit and watch an old black and white movie or reminisce about the old days. When I graduated from high school, my mom didn't even bother to attend my high school graduation, although I didn't expect much from her by this time. I was still a bit sad that my only parent didn't care about me a single bit. However, my grandmother and Shirley's parents were there for me, and they cheered for me during graduation. Later, when I was getting ready to go out to party with my friends, my mom came into my room to inform me that she and Andrew felt that I was now an adult, so I needed to step up and take responsibility around the house. Confused, I asked her what she meant by that since I always washed my own dishes and did my laundry. This was when my mother informed me that I needed to find a job and start paying the bills around the house. She said that Andrew felt I wasn't carrying my weight and that, as an adult, he expected me to contribute money. I was a bit pissed that she didn't give me a single day to celebrate before dumping this news on me, but nevertheless, I agreed to contribute as much as I could. Over the next few weeks, I applied and got a job as a cashier at Burger King while also simultaneously applying to various colleges. Eventually, I got into a good college in my town, which meant that I didn't have to waste money by opting for hostel accommodations, but I did need to buy a car so it would be easier for me to attend classes. I decided to have a talk with my mom to ask her if she could help me buy a car, but she and Andrew immediately got pissed hearing this. Andrew yelled at me that they were doing more than enough for me with the tight income they both had and that for once I needed to stop being so selfish. I couldn't comprehend exactly what it was that made me selfish in his books, but Mom didn't even try to defend me. She told me that I was on my own and that, as an adult, I needed to figure things out. Imagine my surprise when just a few weeks later, I woke up to a few workers working on remodeling the kitchen and the downstairs washroom. When I asked Mom about it, she told me that Andrew was sick of how old and rusty the house looked, so he was going to be changing a few things here and there. I asked her where they got the money to do this when, according to them, they didn't even have the money to help me out with a car a few weeks ago. Hearing this, Mom got frustrated with me and said that I was being entitled to expect them to help me. For the next few weeks, I watched Mom and Andrew change things around the house and completely revamp it. I kept my mouth shut throughout all this and just kept my head down. Shirley knew I was upset over this and tried to cheer me up as much as she could. However, today when I returned home, I found my things and clothes in the living room. I rushed to check on my things, yelling at Mom about why they were there and not in my room. This is when Andrew and Mom came downstairs to tell me that they needed to talk to me about something very important. They then went on to excitedly announce that Mom was pregnant with Andrew's child and that they had kept this news to themselves for over 2 months. Andrew then went on to state that, as the father of the child, he needed to think about the needs of his child first, and he had decided to change my room into a nursery for his baby. My mouth hung open in shock as he went on to say that it was time for me to move out and live on my own since he and Mom had agreed they could not take care of a freeloader anymore. Mom nodded in agreement and suggested I could move into Grandma's place until I could afford my own. I could feel teardrops welling up in my eyes at that moment. I felt so unwanted that I didn't even bother to argue with them. I called an Uber and took all my important documents so I could spend the night here at my grandma's place. She is as shocked as me and hates my mom even more now. She wanted to go right back and confront my mom, but before that, I wanted to take some legal advice. I have just recently turned 18, and I know that the house rightfully belongs to me. So will I face any issues removing my mother and Andrew from the premises? Will I have to consult with a lawyer regarding this? Update 1. Okay guys, thanks for all your advice. I read all your comments and decided to do what most of you told me to do. First of all, today I went to visit my lawyer to understand my legal stance better. The lawyer informed me that there was no way that Mom and Andrew had any right over the house as my dad's will was crystal clear, and that I needed to hand them a formal eviction notice, which could then be used to sue them if they didn't abide by it. After this, I visited my house with my grandma. I had the keys to my place, so I didn't even bother to ring the doorbell. Luckily, there was no one home. I called Shirley's dad and asked him if he could help me change the locks in the main door and the back door. Fortunately, he agreed. By the time Shirley and Andrew returned home, the locks had been changed. I met them outside on the porch with my grandma and refused to let them inside. Andrew was furious seeing me standing there, but my 5 feet 5 inches grandma was not scared of him a bit. She looked him right in the eyes and told him that they had 30 days to move out since I had decided to sell the house, and there was nothing that they could do to stop it. I then handed them a written notice signed by my lawyer outlining their 30-day eviction period and the legal consequences they would face if they did not comply. Andrew snatched the paper from my hand to inspect it, his face turning red in anger. He then crumpled it, but Grandma warned him that destroying it wouldn't change anything. They had 30 days, and that was non-negotiable. Seeing this unfold, Mom started to beg me and tell me that I should not put her through so much stress during her pregnancy. She went on to say how big of an inconvenience it would be for them to move out when she was already going through so much. I was so mad at her for never defending me all this time that I started yelling at her for being such a horrible mother to me for all these years. I reminded her how she would just leave me to fend for myself while she would be passed out from drinking. I told her how as an adult she needed to find her own place and stop living at my place. Hearing this, she started to plead even more, but I told her that she and her freeloader husband were done mooching off of me in my house. Andrew looked horrified and tried to ignore me and get inside the house, but quickly realized that his keys didn't work anymore since the locks had been changed. He started to yell at me, but I told him that I would call the police on him because he was technically trespassing on my property now. It was satisfying to see him look pissed but unable to do anything. I told both of them that this was only going to be the start of all their trouble and their new baby if they didn't listen to me. I reminded them that not only would I sue them, but I would make sure that it would drain all their finances while I could just recover the money from selling the house. Eventually, I told them that I had nothing to lose at this point and that me and Grandma were going to be staying with them for the next 30 days to make sure that they were going to be packing and leaving. Andrew and Mom were clearly not expecting this and tried to argue back, but I wasn't having it. I reminded them that I was the owner and they were merely just guests, so if they didn't like what I was saying, they were free to go to a motel, and that I would move all their things out to the porch for them to collect the next morning. Their faces turned a mix of anger and desperation, but they knew that I was done with their nonsense. This was my house, my rules, and it was time for them to respect that. Update 2. Wow. I woke up today to find my post on TikTok going viral. I live in a small town, so there is a high chance that if my neighbors or friends come across my post with a video circulating, then they might recognize me. Now addressing the questions about why I'm giving my mom and Andrew a 30-day legal notice. It's because my lawyer advised that this would ensure they have no grounds to sue me if this ever goes to court. As for those asking about the money my stepdad spent on remodeling the house, I want to be fair. When I sell the house, I am prepared to reimburse him for the remodeling costs, provided he can produce proper bills that my lawyer can verify. As for those asking why my grandma and I are staying here with my mom and Andrew, it's because I don't want them to unfairly claim any part of this property, since they don't pay me any rent as the owner of the house. I'm not going to leave my property. I also refuse to provide them with a key to my door, so they can't even claim that they left here without a key. My grandma, who is a no-nonsense person, wants to be here to make sure these leeches are out of here soon. Update 3. It's been a while since I gave an update here. Well, as some of you suspected, my stepdad and mom did try to play dirty and refused to move out when their 30-day legal notice ended. However, I am smarter than them, and the next time they went for my mom's ultrasound, I moved all their things to the porch and refused to let them back in. They came back and tried to call the police on me, but there was nothing the police could do. I calmly showed them proof that I was the legal owner and explained that my stepdad and mom didn't even have a key to the house. Seeing this, the police informed them that their only option was to go to court if they wanted to contest my claim. Andrew cursed me out loudly and started to walk over aggressively, but one of the officers warned him to calm down or risk being detained. Eventually, my mom and Andrew were removed from my property, and it was satisfying to watch them realize exactly what they had lost. Since then, I have installed cameras all over my property and talked with a real estate agent who will start showing the house to potential buyers next week. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My boyfriend used me for my money and cheated, so I ghosted him and took his business throwaway account. I, F36, have dated Nick, M37, for 3 years. I wasn't perfect, but my perception is that we have had an overall positive relationship until a year ago when I caught him cheating. I'm financially independent and have been a careful planner in terms of my finances. I'll be completely debt-free on January 22nd. I had a hard time forgiving him, but he did everything to regain my trust, and we had a somewhat smooth run for about 8 months. He asked me to help him start a business, which I did, in part. I wrote the plan according to his idea, coached him through getting his permits and all other steps. He didn't follow through. First, it was that he didn't have time. Then it was that he was anxious because getting it off the ground wouldn't be immediate. So, in other words, I created a business for him where I would be his main client. This sounded like a happy medium since he wanted me to appoint him as my partner, and that's unthinkable. For background, I went to college, and while being an average student, I did work hard later on when I found my first job to make up for not having an excellent academic record. I earned certificates and invested in my education however I could to improve my chances. Paid off. I've been self-employed since I was 28. When I met Nick, he told me he owned a small agency, but was about to get a government job since the economy wasn't helping. I was perfectly okay with that. Things were going well until I found out that he was seeing his ex. This was a huge blow for me because I didn't know what I did for him to do this. I did everything in my power to be supportive and to be reliable, so I did my best to look nice for him, and I was contributing to the household. I paid half of everything, and it was my place. We had a long crisis until I chose to forgive and let go. During this new honeymoon phase, he got a better job, treated me with love, and was very attentive to my feelings. I began to see red flags early this past October. He suddenly wanted me to be hands-off from his startup, didn't want to go out, and lost interest in sex. He became grouchy and rude. It was all about him and his needs. He'd lost his job last year due to COVID. We moved to a house I leased in January. I love the house, but it created friction between us. I'm an animal lover. My landlord doesn't interfere with my pet-related activities as long as I can keep the place clean. I built a cattery for my 10-plus cats that I've rescued. It's an indoor space with controlled temperature, and all their supplies are available to them 24/7. This was my dream. I wanted to help those kitties stay off the street since I've been feeding them for years. Also, they have all their shots. One of them had CKD but bounced back. Nick knew this from the start. The house is clean. No pet smells, thanks to the automatic cat litter boxes. He resented the cats because he wanted his family to move in. The answer was no, we never discussed this. He went as far as to ask me to get rid of the cats and suggested I put them up for adoption. The cats were not his expense. He hasn't worked a steady job in months, while I've helped him fund his business meetings because I didn't want to kill his dream. He does contribute, but significantly less. I cannot live with his family. They are beggars and moochers. The pattern is that his siblings and himself break off their relationships as soon as babies are born. I realized this too late. Nick says his ex went crazy after she gave birth. His brother tricked his ex into moving with her parents while he found a home for them and the baby. He never found a house but knocked her up a second time, so her parents banned him from stepping into their home. The youngest brother hightailed it with his wife when she had her second baby. All his siblings and his mom lived together. His reason for wanting them to move in was that we had 3 spare bedrooms plus a very large family room, and that it would be great if they saved on rent. So I guess there was no intention to contribute. Long story short, I got really sick by the end of October. I never got so much as a kind gesture from him. I cried due to body aches, and he just stayed away. His excuse is that I could be contagious. It wasn't COVID. He never asked me if he could get me anything to eat and hardly ever came to check on me. I spent a lonely Thanksgiving while still recovering because he left to be with his family. My loved ones aren't near because I left everything for him. At some point, we talked about marriage. I recently found out he is back with his side chick. I was going to hire a PI, but it's not worth it. I already know what I need to know. I got a hold of his phone and found about 3 weeks' worth of texts. They are definitely having sex. I've held this inside of me because, at first, I was in too much pain to confront him. I don't wish it on anybody. We are hardly on speaking terms, and he hasn't even bothered to ask me what's wrong. I didn't find anything on his girlfriend's social media, Laura. I did find more than I needed to know from her mother's profile. He has been active in their lives since at least last summer and has been lying to me. This hits close to home. While he's been lying to me about going to job interviews without any luck, I've been partially financing his lifestyle. He is on a so-called business trip to the BVI. I no longer think there is business involved, or he may be combining business with something else. I don't know if this is a fake business conference or what, and I don't want to know. I did see Laura's mother's social media, and she vaguely mentions a trip abroad. I'm leaving him, first because of the pain he's causing me and second because he's a liar. I need advice to see if there's anything I'm leaving out. For my to-do list, I'll be disconnecting from him. I'm not granting him the luxury of knowing that I'm pulling the rug in advance. I already talked to the landlord as I'll be leaving the house slightly earlier. I'll be using Nick's trip to uproot myself. I already hired a company that specializes in pet transport since I'm concerned about flying pets in cargo. I have all their health certificates in order, so they will be coming to pick my kittens up by 9 a.m. Nick's flight leaves much earlier, so he needs to be out by 6 a.m. I'm moving closer to my family, and I've already made arrangements to board my pets until a new cattery is built for them. My sister will take care of it. I will be living on my own property. I've arranged for the movers to come the same day in the afternoon. That way, I'll have time to pack and separate my stuff from his. I'll have all his personal items shipped to his mother's house because I don't want any personal interaction. All business efforts have been canceled. I've made sure he gets no access to my clients and deleted the business plan, etc. I need to change all my passwords and all the pins on all my cards and the Visa I've allowed him to use for emergencies because he might be able to draw from it. I also need to drain the bank account I let him use for business expenses and close it. I think it's best if I do it while he's flying to keep him from using them. I don't know if I'm leaving anything out. I will leave immediately to avoid any surprises, his family coming to confront me, etc. He can now move in with his GF if he wants. I think she lives with her parents, but he will no longer be my problem. Any suggestions? I'd hate to leave loose ends. Update 1. I moved out and I'm safe. First of all, thanks to all of you who took the time to send me your good wishes and pieces of advice. You've been really helpful. I take your good faith to heart. I created a checklist with all your suggestions to make sure that I made a clean exit, or as clean as possible. The pet transport service was on time. I'm glad that my cats made it safely. My sister was very helpful and took care of the new cattery, which will be the entire middle bedroom. It's very spacious, bigger than my old cattery, and they will be happy there. I'm not too crazy about outdoor catteries because I love keeping them indoors. They can enjoy sightseeing from the windows. Nick seemed to be in a hurry to leave. I thought he might leave by 6 a.m., but he left before 5 o'clock. I spent the night, or most of it, canceling services he wouldn't notice and keeping things in order. I'm glad I never gave up my home office. He wanted me to give it up so that we could use the room to accommodate his family. He already had the mental picture that I should do it, plus give up my cats so that the cattery would become an additional bedroom. I find the home office really useful as I need to have a separate mental space. This is how I close my workday, log off, and avoid constantly checking work on the computer. I could never do that if I kept my office space where I sleep. I locked myself all night to work on removing any link to him. Still painful, but my resentment is helping me despise him even more. After he left, I was able to separate his belongings from mine until the pet transport came in. I was nervous, thinking that he might suddenly show up, but thankfully it didn't happen. I stopped by to donate his business suits on my way to the bank. A scumbag doesn't need nice suits. I don't know why I let him talk me into getting him nice clothes to look presentable at work meetings. He never completed anything, not even after business meetings. I also donated all our unopened food. I hate throwing away food. I got a list of documents the bank required to close and drain accounts, so I'm glad the teller was helpful. I took advice from Redditors and went to a different branch to avoid familiarities between Nick and bank workers. I locked my credit, reported all cards as stolen, including his emergency visa, the ATM he used for occasional business expenses, and removed him from all my reward systems. Pharmacy, supermarket, etc. I changed my phone number a bit later, so there's no way he can use them. The main reason for me to keep my old number for a short while was to avoid being disconnected should his family call. If they called, I would be warned that something was up. Mainly, I tried to use his 8 hours of air travel to disable all financial ties to avoid confrontation. The movers took a little longer because some furniture needed disassembling. I gave them all his tools and workbench that I gifted Nick. They also helped me take down the cattery. I had the landlord keep the bed as I'm repulsed. All his belongings were documented and shipped to his mother. I was told it could take a day or two. The landlord already got the keys. I left ASAP after cleaning up because I was nervous he would call his family in case he tried to use the cards and they would show up to my place. I donated most of my clothing, same place where I left Nick's suits, to avoid triggering memories. I don't need all that stuff. I'm not a fancy dresser, so whatever replacements I get won't be expensive. I took all the electronics I bought for him. Game console, tablet, desktop, the latter were my efforts to help him build an office. More on the tablet below. I left for a B&B about 4 hours away to make sure I didn't run into his family. I'm still tired and mentally exhausted, but I'm satisfied that I did it before Nick landed in the BVI. I tried to use the cards, found out he sent someone since he was blocked from my phone, etc. I kept finding things that made me feel even more stupid, but what's done is done. I opened his external memory to delete any of the files that I created and found an e-business card with his exes. Now side chicks. Name is Chief Marketing Director for the company I created for him. This is beyond dishonesty. Please, Marketing Director, my ass. They are living in a dream. I was told in my previous post to expose him to her, but she knows about me. Her texts were sometimes insistent on him making a choice and sometimes very passive about understanding he needed time. Her mother and sister both did a Facebook check-in at a BVI airport, so this is definitely not a business trip. Let them cover for his expenses now. I don't think her mother likes Nick because their texts make reference to some parental interference from her mom. I'm sure Nick's show will begin when he tries to get into our place. Maybe the owner already changed the locks by then. If not, he must already know as his stuff was shipped. I will take advice and go to therapy because my levels of anxiety are over the top. About his tablet. I logged onto it and found it logged on to his email accounts and texting. It was both cathartic and awful. I found out he'd been fired from his government job. It's not that he lost his job, he FN got fired. Lied to me about getting a new job and then lied about not getting paid. For what I gathered, he spent days walking around the mall. I don't know for what purpose. She constantly asked him if he was at XYZ shop. Sometimes he sent her pics of his breakfast at the mall. I started that relationship fair and square. He was single, at least. I'm glad I was never a side piece. His breakup with her is confirmed by the messages. She's very young, F25, has a job, and comes from a tight-knit family from what it looks like on her mother's Facebook page. Their messages also let me know what a lowlife he is. He wanted her to actively market his non-existent business, and when she succeeded, then he would be comfortable about leaving me. He told her he would have left me earlier, but she needed to understand that would affect him, and she needed to understand that. She replied with desperate messages that she was looking for a better job. Sometimes she was docile and didn't push him. Nick showed up one day with a rolling case bag full of documents. He said we could use it to call in clients. I was excited until he said it was from his ex's office. That those files were meant to be discarded, so he would use them. That was among the first red flags that I got when I found out they were back together. I refused, 1 because those are confidential client files and it's illegal to, and 2 because I wanted nothing to do with her. So, in other words, her boss entrusted her to dispose of them, and she turned them over to Nick. I had lied up about this some time ago. Initially, I wasn't going to do anything, but after reading her unkind messages when I was sick, I decided to turn the files over to her boss via my lawyer. No further action will be taken on my side, but aside from screwing her up, I need to make it clear that I never used, stole, or took advantage of those files, just in case she and Nick get in trouble somewhere along the way. I'm safe and happy to be so near my family, but I'm mentally drained. I feel dirty and disposable. His family knew, his friends knew. She knew I existed and said I was playing sick to get pity. She texted that I wasn't helping more financially because I'm greedy. His replies reinforced this. His empty goals played a part here. He's been promising her that he will make it big and talks too much about an industry he hardly knows. All he had were my good faith and knowledge. He never nurtured his own network because he gets mad when he's told no but does nothing to be worthy of people's time. I will never help a man build himself ever. I need to refocus and rebuild my life. I want to help my sister. Maybe I'll take chunks of Nick's so-called business and develop it for her if she agrees. I need to lose my feeling of being invalidated. It helps that I left a show behind for them to deal with. Let Nick move in with his sharp-tongued sister and her unruly kids that she allows to climb on the wall. If they could let him find out how the website has been taken down. He asked me to back him up to occasionally pay for the business dinners. I wonder if he tried to be a hero and tried to slide the card for his side chick's family's meals. I will never know. I hope he enjoys living with his little brother and his baby mama drama from an ex who is now successful and wastes no time dragging him down. I'd love to see the situation when his other brother gets yelled at and taken to court by his ex. This is basically a yearly event. Or when his sister goes crazy and starts yelling because her ex walked out on her, and somehow this is everyone else's fault. Thanks again for your kindness. To those who PM'd me about help opening a business, I'd like to say 1. You can start a business with little money as long as you have a valuable service to offer. Do market research. Don't go crazy trying to get everywhere. Avoid saturated markets. 2. Invest in compliance. There's no way around it. Taxes, formation, registrations, and certificates are mandatory if you want to be taken seriously. 3. Based on my bitter situation, don't trust anybody. No one. Don't share your good fortune. With losers, help your loved ones and ride-or-die friends. Don't mix love and money. Just don't give a hand up. Don't give handouts. 4. Do things in bits. Macro plans are doable if taken apart. Just my 2 cents. Update January 5th, 2022. Thanks for your kind replies and messages. My update is kind of fragmented as it's not first-hand knowledge. I spent New Year's Eve with my family. It was both weird and a relief. It was so nice. I almost felt out of place since Nick's family is kind of difficult in terms of keeping their relationships together. Their holiday gatherings tend to bring a lot of tension. So my New Year's Eve was simple. I went to visit family and got to enjoy the gathering with old friends we've known for years. We took all the precautions, COVID vaccine shots, etc. I like the feeling of just being a regular person and not having to be guarded against getting on Mill's or Sill's bad side or feeling that my so isn't making an effort to compensate for me being away from my family. My sister agreed to allow me to help her set up a new business. I'll be coaching her. She won't have to go crazy looking for clients. Says I'll outsource some tasks to her. I'll be helping her get new clients once she fully learns and masters her new trade. Also, this will surely allow her to practice while gaining credibility. She's a hard worker and she already enrolled in courses so that she can gain some expertise. My sister is a patient learner who writes everything down. I love it because it encourages me to keep it up. I had a chance to get to know my teenage nieces and nephews a little better. They grew fast while I was away, and to actively participate in helping the family pets stay in a room where they would be safe during the fireworks madness. I rolled the storm stoppers at home before I left, so hopefully it helped with sound insulation. I left my family's home early the next morning and spent the whole day in my pajamas watching comedy shows. Honestly, lounger wear is the best way to ease my malady. I need the lighthearted stuff right now. I got lots of sushi and pizza. I treated myself too. I'm still recovering from my illness, and I think the long trip took a toll because I'm fatigued. It could also be mental exhaustion. Well, my only option now is to get better. So about Nick, the hit the fan at least twice. I got an update from my landlord. My lawyer suggested I give my old landlord my new number to keep communication open should he need anything or need any post-move adjustments. I left owing him no money. The cattery and everything else were taken down, but it's best to keep communication open to avoid misunderstandings. Everything was clear between me and Andy, landlord. He just called to verify that I didn't give Nick any instructions towards asking him for anything. First, he showed up asking for assistance unlocking the door because his key was broken, lying. The landlord refused, but when he came back this time with his mother and sister, the landlord called me as Nick claimed that I said I'd left some of his stuff with Andy. This makes no sense. I confirmed this is a lie. Nick wanted Andy to open the door for him, but Andy declined. Andy mentioned things that he just can't make up. He said Nick told him that he's a businessman and a respectable person and that he's a victim because I'm trying to take him down because I know he can succeed. This sounds so familiar. Back when we were together, he used to blame unknown enemies for his setbacks. When I say unknown, just think about the man that started when I called him out for not putting enough effort on his goals. Oh, and he said this is happening because he broke up with me and I couldn't handle it. Also, he tried to talk Andy into letting him stay for the remainder of the lease to extinguish the time frame until next rent. But obviously the answer was no. Also, even if he got in, all utilities have been canceled. His sister suggested Nick bring a bed or something to use up the remaining weeks of the lease. But this is a no-go since the lease was only on my name. This originated an exchange between her and the landlord. Nick and his family insisted on lurking around after being asked to leave. He says Nick and his mother made it really hard to get rid of, and that his sister sat on the stairs and was defiant. I can't recall what her reply was when Andy told her that sitting on the staircase wasn't allowed, but it was enough to piss Andy off. Nick was hellbent on convincing him that he needed to let him in to retrieve his business files and info. Nothing else happened at this point after they were told the police would be called on them, so Nick and his family went outside and remained in the parking lot, and he told me Nick looked flushed and unhinged and was talking really fast. Oh, and he demonized me the whole time. Andy and I had excellent landlord-slash-tenant rapport, so I was kind of embarrassed when he told me Nick tried to put himself at Andy's professional level and kind of tried to remove boundaries. I know this is on Nick, but it reflects on me also because I was with him. That's all I know from Andy's side, so sorry if this doesn't make a lot of sense. I called my lawyer. It was all covered before I left, but I got confirmation that a successful lawsuit is another long shot since Nick only used his mother's address as his official dwelling place. He even used it in for his legal battle with his ex-wife. I know this for a fact. My sister sent me screenshots from his AP's mom's profile. Nick's sister and AP's sister have been at crossfire over their siblings. I don't know AP's sister's personality, but I know my former SIL is very prone to getting involved. There are lots of cryptic hostile posts on his sister's side. It's all hatred against her own ex and lots of venom against people who will claim to love you but won't hesitate to attempt to destroy you. Never trust someone who claims they will help you but will leave you with nothing. She also makes reference to little women who get infatuated with men and dump them after they are finally available. Beware of women who behave like groupies. They don't love you. They won't stick with you. You will learn who really loves you when you have nothing but yourself to offer. Also, she got lots of quotes with Nick being tagged about family being there for you. Tomorrow will look better. That's totally them and the dynamics of their family from hell. They love to hurt people but act like victims and are too sensitive to take responsibility. Okay, so the AP's mother has gone crazy in the last 6 days or so. They did celebrate New Year's Eve, and Nick's face is nowhere to be seen. All of her siblings are shown with her SOS, and she is not shown with him. Also, all pics showing Nick from the Caribbean family vacation seem to have been deleted. I noticed she wasn't tagged in her employer's Christmas post. I'm familiar with that company's style. I'll admit I went crazy checking their profile when I first found out about their affair the first time around, and they love to tag their employees. It's a small company. She was tagged for Thanksgiving and all the previous EG greeting posts from every holiday in 2021. So they include all their employees in these posts, and she hasn't been included. Not on the Christmas post. Not on the New Year's Eve post. Not on the New Year's Day post. They posted about 3 entries in between, and she wasn't tagged. Her profile is active, but she's just not being included. Her sister who lives abroad posted a picture of all the siblings, and she definitely hates Nick. Nick's AP replied with a nice sentence about family, and the sister told her that she's amazing and that she assures God will have great things in storage for you next year. Remember, when a door closes, thousands will open, and whomever should not be in your life will be removed, no matter how painful it gets. Also, she posts a lot about freeloaders. I don't like AP, but I feel that somehow she's getting scapegoated by his family. I'm not sure what happened or exactly what went down. They are definitely not together, and she seems to no longer be working at that firm. Her mother seems to be reeling and has been writing a lot about parasitic men, losers seeking someone to latch onto, and mothers are always right, tbh. I don't think their breakup, if so, has to do with me canceling his chances at using me. The vibe I'm getting is that maybe he tried to squeeze more than was acceptable from AP in front of her family, or I could be wrong. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My wife quit our farm for a fancy job, but then I caught her lying about a work trip and cheating after 26 years together. So I divorced her, kept the farm, and my kids don't talk to her. My ex-wife, 52F, and I, 53M, had been married for 26 years. I'll call my ex Joanne, just for story's sake. Anyways, beyond those 26 years, Joe and I have known each other since we were 17. We went to high school together. Well, I went to a high school on the opposite part of town, and she went to the Catholic high school. All we've known is each other. Right out of high school, we decided to travel for a bit and experience a bit of what life had to offer, because we knew that we wanted to start a family, and travel might be sort of out of the picture or at least look different after we had kids. Not only that, but I had come into some money after my grandfather passed away, and he had passed down some land to my father, who had then gifted us about a quarter section of land. When we came back, we built our own place on the land that had been passed down to me, got married, and Joanne quickly got pregnant with the first of our 4 boys. My family comes from a long line of farmers. It's what we do best. I had always known that it was something that I was going to end up doing, but it never bothered me. I didn't feel forced into it by any means. It was something that I was interested in, and I took pride in. I had helped both my grandfather and father on the family farm since I was just a small boy. It was in my blood. Joanne came from a big blue-collar family. Her father was the best heavy-duty mechanic in the county and had spent a lot of time at our farm fixing our equipment. That's actually how we met. She tagged along with her father one day when a piece of equipment had broken down. We caught each other's eye, and the rest was history, as they say. Even though her father was who he was, she had never actually gotten her hands dirty until we built our house on the farm. I don't want to toot my own horn, but at the time, my family was one of the largest dairy producers in the north. And because of that, my family's name was well known and well respected. I remember talking to Joanne and telling her that there wouldn't be much outside of the farm for me. I'd likely be working on it until the day I die. But she claimed she was okay with that. She told me that this was the life she wanted and that she wanted to be with me, and anything outside of that wasn't a life she wanted to be a part of. And so she helped me operate the farm up until about 4 years ago. By then, our boys had long been grown men, starting their own families, and were also helping out on the farm. Around that time, she took up a job with a company similar to a door-to-door cosmetics marketing scheme of sorts. A friend of hers from out of town had talked her into it. She said she would do really well in something like that because she was so hot and charismatic and was well known in the area. She had joined a bunch of councils and boards. These apparently were her friend's words, hot and charismatic. I encouraged her to take the leap and said that she'd do well no matter what she did. After her friend said that, Joanne kept asking me if I thought she was pretty and if she was good-looking. This really felt like it came out of nowhere to me. Joanne had never been the kind of woman to doubt herself, and honestly, Joanne was one of the most beautiful women I had ever laid eyes on. I told her she was beautiful, and I tried to make a habit of saying that to her every day after that. It had gotten me thinking that maybe I hadn't been saying enough prior to that. It was shortly after that when I noticed Joanne's enthusiasm about the farm started to slip away. She just wasn't interested in it and didn't really ask me about my day anymore or go out of her way to do small chores around the farm. Not that I expected that of her, but it was just usually what she had done. We ended up talking, and she said that she didn't want me to be mad at her for taking on a new job, and I told her that I had more than enough help and that she should do what makes her happy. I would never be mad at her for doing something that made her happy. She ended up taking the job and actually doing quite well with this certain company. Once you sell a certain amount of products, the company actually buys you a vehicle, Not just any vehicle, but one of those fancy schmancy German vehicles. She ended up becoming regional manager, and the company compensated her for her hard work with a free car. I was really proud of her, but as soon as she got the car, I noticed her personality change a bit. She drove around town like she didn't stink, and I had to hear about it from the husbands who had heard it from their wives. At first, I just thought it was jealousy. I mean, it's not unheard of in a small town. People don't really like change all that much or like people flaunting their cash. My wife had always been so modest. She had dressed well, but she didn't dress above her means. She was always a t-shirt and jeans kind of gal. And my wife, in the whole time that I've known her, had never gotten her nails done. But after that car, she started getting her nails done, and she was buying all these high-fashion clothes that she'd drive into the city to get. I mean, I'm not a fashionista by any means. I couldn't tell you one designer from something you'd get at Walmart. But the clothes she was wearing were racking up the visa. Not that she wasn't paying it down, but I knew the amount that she was spending on clothes when the bills would come in, and it was more than she had ever spent on clothes in about 5 or so years. I tried to be supportive. She told me that this job was all about image and standard. She said no one was going to take her seriously selling ladies' makeup and cosmetics when she was looking like she came off the farm. The way she had explained it did make sense at the time. I thought, hey, who am I to tell her what she can and can't do with her money? Anyways, this job allowed her to travel and work from home. The money she was bringing in allowed us to take trips here and there, but nothing too crazy. I mean, we weren't a Disneyland family. We had been to the Grand Canyon and to Joshua Tree, but nothing far beyond that. When she traveled all over for conferences and meetings and whatnot, she'd go to Miami, Las Vegas, San Francisco, and New Orleans, just to name a few. I mean, big enough cities that they seemed a bit overwhelming to a redneck like me. But when Joanne would come back home, she'd be full of life. And it was so great to see Joanne fresh and revitalized. I honestly felt really happy for her. Now, I can't remember exactly when this was, but I think it might have been around November when she came to me and told me that there was a man, I'll call him Dom, who had recently started with the company. I thought it was weird to have a man in there selling ladies' makeup and what have you, when the company was primarily women. But I thought, hey, times are changing. She said that he was a sales director and wasn't actually selling the products himself, but that they had brought him in to expand the company. She said that he had come up with this big idea to compensate those who had made the top sales of the year for a trip to Mexico in February. I thought, sweet, we're going to Mexico. Both of us had never been. Then she breaks the news to me that it's only for people from the company, and friends and family aren't allowed. I was like, huh, that's bizarre. But I thought that since it was the farthest they've ever gone for something like that, it made sense that they couldn't afford to offer the trip to family as well. Family has been invited out to other things before this, but nothing as extravagant as Mexico. So, surprise, surprise, Joanne ends up being the top saleswoman in her region, and because of that, she was rewarded with this trip to Mexico. Apparently, she was one of 10 ladies, plus a few regional directors and top folk in the company, including Dom. February pops up. She goes on this trip. I hardly hear from her in the time that she's gone. But this isn't out of the ordinary when she's away for work. I also told her to go and relax and have fun. So I wasn't hurt or anything when I didn't hear from her, because I knew she was trying to unplug. I go to pick her up from the airport when she gets back. And on the drive home, all I hear is Dom this and Dom that. Apparently, he's 43, never been married. He's from Los Angeles and works remotely. She said that this was the first time she actually met him in person. She said that he used to work as a car salesman. Apparently, he was tall, dark, handsome, and knew how to dress himself. She admires how driven he is, and he really listens to her and what she has to say. Plus, he's incredibly charming, and they just drank at the Shoals side bar and played beach volleyball the whole time. I didn't want to seem against it all, but the way she was talking about him really rubbed me the wrong way. On one hand, I knew that she was happy and having fun, and I was proud of her professional growth. But on the other hand, just the way she was talking about it made me uneasy. Something just seemed beyond professional about it. Then again, I wasn't used to Joe and really working. Not that working on the farm wasn't working, but we worked side by side with each other. I thought that maybe these feelings I was having were just jealousy, since I hadn't actually seen her work in a type of environment that wasn't on the farm, like a corporate type. Fast forward a bit to April. I came inside to find this package on our kitchen table. It's addressed to Joanne, and I see that the sender says Dom. I decide to leave it there and see if my wife says anything about receiving something from him at dinner. Over dinner, I see that she's wearing this new fancy watch that I don't recall her saying she's purchased herself. Usually, she's pretty keen on showing off what she's bought. I ask her about her watch, and she says that it just came in today and it's a gift from her company for all of her hard work. I asked her if it was from anyone in particular from her company, and she said, nope, just a group thank you. I didn't question any further, but I knew she was lying. I knew it had nothing to do with work because her company usually sends things like that in company-branded wrapping or letterhead. This straight up looked like Dom had packed it personally. Later that night, we were laying in bed, and I decided to ask her, are you attracted to Dom? She acted shocked and offended that I'd even ask such a question. She said, of course not, and said that I'm the only man that she's ever been attracted to. I wasn't really convinced by this and told her that I didn't feel comfortable with the relationship she had with Dom. Well, you can imagine that started a huge fight. She talked about how there was nothing between them and that I was just jealous that she's doing well for herself and it has nothing to do with me or the farm, and that I'm mad at her for not working on the farm anymore. I stood my ground and told her that it didn't have anything to do with the fact that she wasn't working on the farm anymore. I said that I didn't trust Dom and his intentions. I told her that I knew that the watch was from Dom. I said, imagine if some woman was sending me gifts like that and I was keeping it a secret from you. And she's like, but I'm not lying. I told you it was from the company as a gift for the sales that I'm making and the records I'm breaking within the company. She said, if I was breaking records, I'd hope I was getting properly compensated too. Needless to say, I ended up sleeping in the spare room. The next day, she talks to me as if nothing happened the night before. She tries to butter me up, give me a kiss and squeezes me, slaps my butt, and tells me that she misses me. No apology though. She's like, we should take a trip together to get back on track. I'm like, okay, sure, and it did seem a bit hopeful at first, until she said she has to take a work trip this upcoming weekend and that we should talk details when she gets back. I'm immediately suspicious. I asked her where she's going. Why didn't she bring this up before? She told me Nashville and that she totally forgot to tell me, but it was an important one not to miss. I ask her if there's anyone she's going to see specifically, and she asks me what I mean by that, and she says it's for training and she said the majority of the company will be going. It's mandatory. She said it's only for 3 days. There was no way I was going to give her the benefit of the doubt at that point. It was just too coincidental. I asked her where she was staying and where it was at, and she told me the Hyatt house. So she goes on this trip. It's Saturday morning, and everything is business as usual for me at home. But then I get this call. It turns out to be an Emma from the Hyatt Regency in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm thinking, why would someone from the Hyatt in Phoenix be contacting me? She tells me there's a slight issue with the room reservation under Joanne. She said there were some discrepancies with the payment method, and she wanted to confirm the details with me. She said the payment information on file didn't match the cardholder's name, and she wanted me to verify the card details right away. The red flags are raised. I ask if anyone else is listed under the reservation or if there's been any guest added to the room. She's quiet for a bit and then says, it looks like there's another guest registered to the room. A Mr. Dominic. Is that correct, sir? And I'm like, actually no, that's not correct. I'm like, can you tell me if they're both checked in right now? She goes, yes, both guests checked in yesterday evening. I decide not to blow my top and give her my credit card, and the conversation ends. I immediately texted Joanne. Just received a call from the hotel. Why is Dom checked in with you? We need to talk now. She texts me back. It's a work thing. He's here for the same training. Nothing to worry about. I'll explain when I get back. I'm fuming at this point. She tries to text me again later that night and she says, thinking of you, miss you and all that, but I'm not responding. She even tried to call me but didn't leave a message. I actually texted my brother and asked him to come over. We sat on the porch, and I told him what's been happening. He says he knows a guy who can help me and get papers sorted if that's what I really want to do. I ended up emailing the guy just to set up an appointment to see what that might look like, But since it was a Saturday, I wasn't expecting a response back. Anyways, she comes home on Sunday afternoon, and my brother is still there. She got her friend to drop her off. She goes to hug me, but I push her away and I'm like, care to explain why Dom was checked into your room? She said there was a mix-up with the reservations and he had nowhere else to stay. Then I ask her how Nashville was. She tells me that it was beautiful weather and the food there was great. I'm like, that's interesting, considering you were staying in Phoenix. She tries to act dumb, and then I tell her that the hotel called me because there was an issue with the payment and that's how I found out about her and Dom. She told me, it's not what you think. I tell her that it looks exactly how it is and that she's been lying to me. I said she was dumb enough not to change the contact information on the travel reward, so they instantly contacted me when there was an issue with the payment. She tries to deny it and says that she got the conference city mixed up when she first told me and that it was actually in Phoenix. I wasn't having any of it. Then she literally goes into hysterics and starts crying and telling me that it was just that once and it was a huge mistake. She's trying to hug me, and my brother literally has to rip her off me. Then he tells Joe and that she better pack more stuff in that bag of hers and get her friend to pick her back up and to stay somewhere else for a while. Interestingly enough, she actually listens to him, and she leaves the house. My brother stays with me that night, and we get into some drinking and go over a game plan on my next moves. After that, we did some investigating and came to find that Dom was actually married with 2 kids. And because I had a few drinks in my system, I messaged his wife and told her that her husband was cheating on her with my wife. I told her everything I knew about the hotel and the gift he bought her. I wake up to Joe and trying to get into the house, and she's shouting at me that she can't believe I'd stoop so low to spread lies about her. Then I tell her to quit the act because I knew she's seeing Dom. She tries the crocodile tears, but I literally tell her I don't believe a word she says. I tell her that she's better off just telling me the truth now. Then she says that she was so severely unhappy for all these years. She said she hated working on the farm and she's just been living this lie. She said she started this job and then met Dom, and everything just changed for her. She said she finally felt free and like herself, and she finally felt beautiful and loved and desired. Then she starts insulting me and calling me a dirty, stupid pig. I asked her if she hated our life together so much, why she stuck around, and she said that she thought it would get better or that she would be able to travel more or do fancy things, but that I was just such a cheap bastard. I told her that I never held her back from anything and we could have traveled if she wanted to and could have gone for fancy dinners. But she never said a word to me. I told her if she would have just said something to me, we might have had a chance, and she said, had a chance, and that's when I told her that I contacted a divorce lawyer. Then she starts begging me for forgiveness and really starts crying. She said she didn't mean it. She said she doesn't know what's come over her. She just liked the way he looked at her. I said, I've been looking at you like that since we were 17, but you were too blind to see. I told her to get out of the house, and she eventually did after I threatened to call her father. Well, then fast forward to the divorce. Obviously, I had a lot more to my name than she did, so that meant I had a lot more to lose. But thankfully, I was able to spend the money on this good lawyer, which he was fantastic. My brother really pulled through. By the time the divorce was over, I had everything that I wanted. I kept the house, the farm, and the business. I sold her back her shares of the business and a few acres of land that I really didn't need. I don't really know what ended up happening with Dom. His account ended up going private, so I couldn't see what was going on in his life. But based on the pictures on his wife's account, she's his ex-wife now. All of the pictures of him that were once there are now deleted. My brother and my boys really supported me through all of this. They weren't too impressed that their mother cheated on me, and it made family get-togethers a bit awkward for a little while until she eventually just stopped showing up to save face. Anyways, I'm moving on, and life on the farm is thriving. Business is good. Like I said, I'll be here until the day I die, but I'm very okay with that. Here's to the future. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My husband's best friend kept texting him about my diet, then tried to take over my baby shower, criticized my cravings, and brought a surprise therapist to our coffee date. I, 22F, and my husband, 23M, got married young. I was 18, he was 19. Both of us knew we always wanted to get married and start a family young. I started college 2 years ago, and he just graduated with a Bachelor of Biomedical Science. My husband has a girl best friend, 23F, who I'll call Sam, who he met in college. Both of them grew up Baptist, and while he's left the church, they had a very similar childhood and bonded quite quickly. Despite what you may be thinking, she and I got along really well. She and I liked the same music, and we were both studying in relatively the same field, so she became a friend of mine as well. Since I found out I was pregnant, though, some issues have started to arise. We announced our pregnancy on social media after we told our parents. Sam texted my husband a congrats text and then told him to pass on her well wishes to me. She's been texting him nonstop with baby advice and what she likes to call advice for mama, which includes sometimes relatively targeted jabs at what I should eat. Honestly, I kept brushing the texts off, but it got to a point where the conversations were less about the baby and more about me, which I was getting increasingly uncomfortable with because she wasn't texting me. She was texting my husband. My husband acknowledged this and has just started to show them to me and ask what I want him to do. I just told him to ignore them. When I announced my baby shower and sent out the invites, I received a text from Sam. She said something along the lines of wanting to host my baby shower and set it up. I told her politely that my mom was planning on hosting it with the help of my sister, and that it was a special moment for them and I wouldn't want to take that away. Well, Sam ignored that message, because the next day she came over and insisted we start working out arrangements for the venue. I told her once again my mom and sister were hosting it, and she told me that she should take her advice and let her plan it because she'd ensure that the baby shower would be better if she planned it, particularly because she'd be working on the menu. Whether it was pregnancy hormones or just bottled-up rage, I told her that the jabs she'd been making at me behind my back about my diet during this pregnancy to my husband are really annoying, and that no, she cannot host this shower, and from now on her unsolicited advice was not appreciated, especially if she can't say it to my face. That night, my husband's phone blew up with messages from Sam saying that he had no right to show her those messages, and they were just supposed to just be health tips because Sam was studying nutritional science and only wanted to help her best friend and ensure a happy baby in life. I know she had somewhat good intentions, and she's been a good friend to my husband and to me, so I don't. Additional info. I decided not to read a lot of the messages she sent simply because I didn't care, but according to my OB, I'm eating perfectly normal things for a healthy pregnancy. I've always been on the skinnier side, and through high school I was severely underweight, but when I got pregnant I needed to eat more to sustain a healthy weight. I don't know if Sam knows that, but I do know that according to my doctor I'm actually eating quite well so far. Are you Sam undercover? I have to ask. Look, I don't know her intentions, but you saying you have been and are still perhaps underweight. Thanks for your unsolicited opinion on my body based on the small amount of information you have been given. I have been eating healthy, and I am now a healthy weight. As for the advice Sam was giving me, it was sound advice. Yes, medically I'm sure it was perfectly normal advice. I'm not arguing with that, but my issue comes from her unsolicited comments. Advice that was not ever given to me under the pretenses of being a good friend. The advice was given to my husband, and apparently I was not supposed to see it. I don't know if you yourself have ever been pregnant, but I'm going to assume no. Advice you don't ask for, comments on how you eat, what you eat, everyone loves to put their 2 cents in, but as long as my doctor says I'm healthy and I'm eating healthy, then as far as I'm concerned, other people's opinions that I never asked for can shove off. Sorry, I have to post this here due to character limits. Hi everyone up here. Just wanted to give some more context and info and answer a lot of your burning questions. Also, thank you for all the well wishes. Our baby girl is healthy and happy, from what I've heard from my OB. Okay, here goes. 1. Sam is in a short-term relationship. They've been dating for about 2 months, and he's nice. I haven't talked to him much, but from what I have gathered, he treats her well. 2. I was severely underweight for most of high school. My mom was always very thin, and so was I, but in high school I suffered from an ED for a while and lost a lot of weight very quickly. For the past 3 years, I've been working with a therapist and food specialist to maintain a good diet, and that has not changed since pregnancy. My OB is happy with my health and the health of the baby. Sam does not know this. Only my close family, friends, and husband do. I don't share that info with many people because I don't find it necessary. 3. Sam met my husband first before I met her. My husband and I had been dating for 3 years by then. We started dating in high school. She has never expressed interest in my husband that I know of. For it was not his choice to ignore the messages but mine. Pregnancy has given me a lot of unnecessary stress, and I didn't want to add to that by causing more drama with people. So if it was his way, he would have shut her down. I told him not to because Sam has always been a passionate person, and I didn't think much about the messages when they first started. That has since changed. 5. What I found most weird about the situation was that I was apparently not allowed to see those messages. Yet they were about me and how I was eating. Some of them were sort of snarky. The worst one I saw was along the lines of criticizing me for wanting McDonald's at 3 o'clock in the morning, when apparently a Big Mac, large fries, and a large vanilla thick shake is not healthy for the baby. I did cry a little bit after reading that, and my husband did send a text message saying that I was allowed to crave stuff during my pregnancy, which she ignored. 6. My husband and I are probably going to go low contact with her for a bit. Also, he rarely hangs out with her anymore, and if he does, he invites me, but I don't always go because I'm tired. 7. Edit. It was my choice to go low contact, not my husband's. Please stop criticizing him for this decision, as it wasn't his. I'm aware this post has now become a place where many people are insinuating that Sam and my husband may have something going on. I assure you they do not. My reasoning for going low contact and not no contact are my own, and it is what I am comfortable with at this moment. Thank you. Update 1. Hi everyone. First, I just want to thank you for all your support. Truly, it means the world. Okay, so hubby and I phoned Sam today and talked to her about the issues we were having with how she was acting. I explained that I was very uncomfortable with the fact that she had been texting my husband, not me, about my pregnancy and eating habits, and that when she assumed she would be granted secrecy and she wasn't, she got mad. Sam explained that in the moment it seemed like a good idea not to text me directly in case she overstepped and made me mad, so she was hoping that if she explained things to my husband, he would be able to relay that info to me casually. She assured me she just wanted to help protect and nurture the baby. To that I said that this isn't her baby. I am perfectly capable of making sure the baby is healthy. She apologized and explained that truly she only thought she was doing something good. My husband and I explained we are just going to distance ourselves a bit because the situation has not only made me uncomfortable, but my husband also said that he needs to focus on his wife right now, and Sam needs to take a back seat. I don't think she was overly happy with this, but she said okay. She asked if she was still invited to the baby shower, and hubby said it may be best that she skips it, but I explained if she wants to, her invitation is still valid and she is still welcome. Sam did text me after the phone call asking if we can meet for coffee, so I'm seeing her tomorrow. I'll update you guys on how that goes. Honestly, I think she was just misguided. She's not a bad person at heart. Thanks. Update 2. This will probably be the last update I do unless something else happens. But safe to say after today, Sam is out of our lives essentially. I did go see Sam and she was not alone. In fact, she brought her cousin who is, pause for effect, a therapist. About 5 minutes into Sam's opening monologue, I left. She explained that after hubby and I told her we wanted low contact, she realized that clearly the stress of expecting a baby had caused me to act irrationally, and she wanted me to have someone to speak to. She even tried to dress it up by saying that yay, I didn't have to pay for this. Anyway, I left. Hubby sent her a message saying we need distance and not to contact us for a while. Edit. This does not mean we are going low contact. We are going no contact, as I stated. She is out of our lives. Sam's a bit irrational right now, and we just want to minimize fallout. Hands down, telling her for a while not to psychoanalyze. But honestly, I think Sam needs help. Clearly she cares, but it's too much, and honestly, it's insulting how little she thinks I can look after myself and my baby. Her overbearing personality has its limits, and honestly, I can't take it. Anyways, thank you for all your support. If there's another update, I'll post here. For now, bye. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Teenage sister got pregnant by my boyfriend behind my back at 17. Now my parents are marrying them off while giving them half of my inheritance and cutting me off when I'm against it. My sister got knocked up by my loser ex. That's the truth. Couldn't have been said in any better way. My ex, 27M, and I, 24F, dated for 2 years, post which I introduced him to my family. My parents, my sister, 19F, and my brother, 15M. 5 months later, I discovered him cheating on me and knocking up my sister. I was shattered. It was like a bunch of arrows thrown at me from all directions. I got cheated on, and that man is going to marry my sister, and I'm going to bump into him for the rest of my life. If you're looking for context, here's one. My ex and I were in the same college. He was in his senior year while I was a freshman when we started going out. He had dropped out earlier to help his dad set up his business. When things got better, he rejoined. 2 years of dating and 4 years of knowing each other, I took him home. It was all happy and fun. We spent the night at my hometown. We went out to a local bar with my siblings. I didn't notice anything wrong between my sister and my ex. This was 2 years ago. My sister was 17 then. We came back the next day, and everything remained normal. My ex and I were not living together. He was living with his brother while I lived with my college friend. That was better than living with my ex because his work involved travel. He also used to travel to his hometown often to oversee his dad's business. I told my parents about this and they freaked out. Mom slapped Rosie, heart on her face. She had always been a troublemaker. She dropped out of school at 14, ran away from home twice at 15, and now got knocked up by her sister's boyfriend at 17. She had not told our parents yet. However, when they got to know, they immediately took her for a scan, and it turned out that she was 7 weeks pregnant. She confessed that my ex used to travel twice, sometimes thrice, a month to meet her, and they used to spend the night at a hotel. The cheating broke my soul. 1, because I got cheated on by 2 very important people in life. 2nd, I was in a serious relationship with my ex. I never had a boyfriend before. I'm quite a studious, boring girl. While my academics benefited me in a lot of aspects, like a full ride at university, it has deprived me of a social life. While I was still processing my heartbreak, my mom told me they were planning a wedding for my sister and my ex. That was another blow to me. I yelled at her that she was still supporting her. She said, no matter what, they're not going to abandon her in this condition, and they would be doing everything to cover up her mess. I rolled my eyes and asked her to leave me alone. She said, I know it hurts you, sweetie, but do we have any other option? We can't get rid of the baby. It's a sin. We can't let the baby grow up as a bastard, can we? We have to get them married. I have spoken to his parents, and they're flying down this weekend. She's yet to show, so we can have it in the church instead of a hush-hush city hall wedding. I stood up and started packing my stuff to leave. I can't just stand there and take every BS they were putting up. She stopped me and said, you can't leave. It's your only sister's wedding. You were a guest. How could she even ask me to attend that wedding? Who slept with my boyfriend? She said that was in the past. In the present situation, she is my sister, and I have to attend her wedding because they don't want to answer people who question my absence. I was like, really, Mom? Your teenage daughter got knocked up by her elder sister's boyfriend, and you are worried that people are going to question my absence at her wedding? You definitely need to align your priorities. She said she doesn't understand these complexities. In her eyes, my ex is now my sister's would-be husband and the father of her child. In my bill, WTF? It made me sick to the guts. I said I'm not going to give in to her pressure, and I'm leaving. She called up Dad and asked him to rush home and knock some sense into me. I was about to leave before Dad arrived. She said, if you leave, they're going to abandon you, and you should never show your face to them even if they die. I said, sure. If you are going to support your low-life daughter over me, then I'm cutting you all off from my life too, and they should never contact me either. On the wedding day, a lot of friends and family called and texted me asking me why I didn't show up at my sister's wedding. I didn't answer any of the calls. One of my cousins who was close to me told me that my parents, especially my mom, told everyone that I didn't attend the wedding because I was jealous that my younger sister was getting married while I was still single. My blood boiled on hearing this. Quite unusual of me. I went to Facebook and wrote a detailed post describing how my sister got knocked up by my boyfriend and how my parents are getting them married to cover up everything. I attached my pictures with my ex and the post to prove my point. My phone blew up after that. My parents sent me threatening messages to take down the post. I took it down, but after a week, they said I brought shame to their house. To cover one lie, they said another lie, that I made a false allegation out of jealousy because my ex found my sister more attractive and fell in love with her. Could you imagine the level of toxicity? I swore to never see their face again in life. That was 2 years ago, and since then, I'm in sea with them. I'm in touch with my brother, though. He contacted me after that and said sorry for not standing up for me. I told him it was fine. He was 13 then. He told me that my parents had put a fancy wedding for my sister from their savings. They had even helped them settle down in the adjacent block. Mom babysits for her son while she roams about with her friends. Yesterday, my brother called me out of the blue. I was in a meeting, but I rushed out to take it. We talk over chats and hardly on calls, so this has to be urgent. He told me Dad passed away. I was distraught. I hung up the call and took the first flight to my hometown. I came here, but I don't know where to go. My mom had asked everyone not to inform me because I didn't deserve to attend his last rites. She was still holding up the grudge against me. I checked into a hotel because, obviously, I could not go home to my cruel mother. My brother told me that the funeral date was yet to be decided, but it was mostly tomorrow or the day after. I haven't told anyone that I am here. I don't know if I should visit my house or not. I mean, my family is still bitter about me. Given my situation, what do you guys suggest? Update 1. Thanks for all the support. I felt so relieved to talk to you guys on DM. Some of you commented that I was scared that my family would gang up against me, and that's why I was not going. Well, you guys are right. I was apprehensive that they would knock me out. I cannot fight with them if they gang up, and obviously, I don't want to put up a fight in front of my father's dead body. Somehow, I mustered the courage and told my brother that I was in town. He insisted that I attend the funeral and that he would be there for me if something of that sort happened. I said thanks for the protection, but I think I can manage. I didn't do any wrong that I need to hide, so I showed up at the funeral. My brother was waiting for me. We hugged each other and cried. My mother and sister gave me looks. My sister yelled at my brother, "Why did he call me?" He yelled back that he was all of us. Dad and I had the right to attend the funeral. Their point was that if I had sworn to cut them off from my life, then I shouldn't be allowed to attend his funeral. My sister almost chased me out, but my uncle and my brother stood up for me. I saw my ex standing in the corner holding his son and watching the drama. My dad might not be the best person out there, yet he was my dad, and watching him lifeless was the most emotional moment of my life. I broke down, but no one except my brother was there to console me. I was about to leave after the funeral when my dad's lawyer told me to visit his office the next day for the will reading. I said I'm not interested. Given my past relationship with my family, I wasn't hoping for any good from his will. He said my dad left me a letter which got me curious and I decided to stay. The next day, I showed up at the attorney's office with my brother. My mother came charging at me. Why was I there, and asked me to leave. They called me names, that I was there just for Dad's money. I said I didn't need the money. Dad had left me a letter. I was there to collect it. They can keep the money. Mom said she knew what was in that letter. He wanted to tell you that he was disowning you. He hated you for shaming the family publicly. I cursed myself for showing up just to get humiliated. Thankfully, the attorney came and relieved me of their taunts. He started reading the will which Dad had modified last year. The house in which they lived was always in Mom's name, so she gets to keep it. His savings and insurance money go to Mom for her survival and the house for retirement. Besides that, he had invested in a trust fund, and he divided it between the three of us. He also mentions the reason behind the division. My sister's son gets 10%. My sister gets 20% because he funded her wedding and paid for their house lease. My brother gets 30% for his university. The remaining 40% comes to me. That was a shocker for everyone, including me. The reason he mentioned was he didn't fund my education. I got a complete scholarship from uni. After I got the job, I helped him pay the house mortgage for over 2 years. My sister flipped out that I got double her share, though my father mentioned the reasons very clearly. She said it was unfair. She repeatedly asked the lawyer if it was the updated one because Dad wanted to disown me. The lawyer said that Dad had left a letter for me, which he wanted him to read in front of everyone. The letter read, "Dad was really proud of me that I was able to make such a good career for myself and that he never had to worry about me. He said he was sorry for not standing up for me and giving in to Mom's pressure and manipulation. He mentioned a few other moments of my childhood and growing up that he cherished. He asked me to take care of my brother. He said he wished to post this letter himself, but he didn't know my address. He hopes to talk to me before I get to read this letter, and he tells me everything in person. I've read that letter at least 100 times after the day, and it still makes me tear up as I write this. My sister and ex left the room midway when the letter was read. My mom remained there and cried. I cried like a toddler hugging my baby brother. I had the return flight in the evening, but my brother insisted I stay, so I've been here for a week now, meeting my brother over brunch and dinner. We just talk and catch up about life and random things. He's finishing high school this year and planning on moving out for grad school. Honestly, I'm worried about him, that after I'm gone, my mother and sister may target him for supporting me. But he says he's now grown up to handle anything they throw. I'm going back tomorrow. I'll update if anything develops. Else this is the end. Update 2. It's not over yet. Looks like my sister and my ex got no chills. So I came back from my hometown after a week and found a notice in my mailbox. My sister has challenged Dad's will in court, saying that there's a typing mistake by his lawyer. They are claiming that Dad has given her 50% of his assets, but the lawyer has made the mistake. I contacted my dad's lawyer and sent him the notice. He said they could not do anything about it because my dad had signed the will in his senses in front of the attorney and witnesses. Apart from that, Dad had clearly mentioned the reason behind the division, so it's a no-brainer. He said that the judge is going to dismiss the case as soon as he reads the will. That's what happened. The asset gets divided as per the will. The case was closed. I thought we were done here, but no, emotional manipulation was on the way. Mom called me. She was crying over Dad's death. She said sorry for cutting me out of their life. After she was done shedding her tears, she asked me how I was doing at work and what was new in life. I said work is fine and so is life, regular. She asked if I got the promotion since I've been working for so many years now. I got curious and asked her why she wanted to know this. She said she was equally proud of me as my dad, that I was excelling in my career and doing so well for myself. I said, and she muttered, well, you know your sister couldn't complete school and got pregnant at a young age. She couldn't have a career like you and she's pregnant again. They are surviving on just one source of income, so I was thinking why don't you be a bigger person and give your share of the asset to her? Well, you can't deny that your dad was being unfair and giving her only 20% while you get double. I stopped her right there. First of all, it's not that she couldn't complete school. It's rather she didn't complete it and dropped out. And you still consider that Dad was unfair when Dad has clearly mentioned the reason for his asset division? I paid the mortgage for 2 years of the house in which you are living. It's not my problem if my sister is surviving on one income. She made that choice. She should have thought about her husband's income before skipping protection for the second child. And yeah, how could we forget about getting knocked up for the first one? My mom lost her mind at this. She was mad that how could I even say these words in front of her. I was like, I just said you're a princess. Did all of this. Why didn't you lose your mind at her? But I see you still coddling her like an infant? She called me mean and jealous of my sister. She was having a family while I was still single, and that's why I was trying to hurt her financially because I cannot beat her in any other aspect. I said, sure, whatever you think. I'm done reasoning with you folks. Yes, you don't have enough brain to understand my point. Probably that's why you gel better with your 6th grader loser daughter. She hung up the phone saying I was spitting poison and that I'm still the vindictive person I was 2 years ago. Do you guys think I should give up my inheritance just because my sister is mindlessly expanding her family without financial planning? Update 3, here's the new update. Almost a month after the last phone call with Mom. One morning I was leaving for work when I saw my car tires were being slashed. I thought my neighbor's child pulled this prank, so I hailed a taxi and went to work. Meanwhile, I called the car service company to get the tires fixed. They fixed it and sent me the pictures. However, when I came back home in the evening, I saw the tires were slashed again, and my car was painted piggy. I saw the other cars parked nearby, and all of them looked fine. Cannot be a coincidence that the children are targeting my car unless I did something wrong to them. I don't remember having any encounters with any children in the neighborhood. I went upstairs to find a note in my mailbox. Give me my share or else I'm going to make you suffer every day. I immediately called my lawyer and told him about the incident. He asked me to change the locks of my house, install a camera outside my apartment, and check the footage of the camera installed in the basement. I informed the chairman of the apartment and asked him for the camera footage. I reviewed it. I saw a woman wearing a long, oversized coat and a big hat entering the basement in the early hours of the morning, but unfortunately, nothing else got captured because the camera angle didn't cover the area where my car was parked. The same woman again entered the basement in the late afternoon, but there was a man with her with his face fully covered. I knew it was my sister and my ex. Since I didn't have any concrete evidence against them, I could not report them. 2 days later, I came home to find someone had broken into my house through the window. It has to be my loser ex because my pregnant sister cannot climb on someone's window to break open mine. Nothing was stolen, but he brought the house to ruins. The curtains were pulled down. The pillows were torn open. My clothes were cut down like confetti, and the china sets were broken into dust. I cannot explain how terrible I felt. It was not about the money. My house was insured, but you understand the hatred they had for me. This called for a police complaint. The cops came and made a note of everything. They asked if I doubted anyone. I told them about the car incident, the note in the mailbox, and my history with my sister regarding the inheritance. The odds worked slightly in her favor because she was pregnant. It took a lot of effort and evidence to prove it was her because the camera didn't capture her face. Based on the circumstantial evidence like the note regarding the asset share and her presence in the town when this happened, their previous charges, case of challenging dad's will, everything put together built a case against her. However, the cops let her go with paying the fine and threatened her not to bother me again. She confessed that she was the one who did everything and not her husband. She did it because she was envious of me regarding dad's unequal division of assets. And besides all that, she was hormonal, so she couldn't control her rage. She had to assure the cops in writing that she would never bother me again. I accepted it because I'm tired of all this. I don't have just this one thing in life. I have a career. I have a life. But I threatened that if this repeated, I'm going to go nuclear on her. My brother told me that he heard Mom talking to my sister and telling her that she was smart and taking everything on herself because her husband would have incurred a heftier fine and maybe some prison time. Who knows? I can't believe they would do this to me. It hurts to think that I never did anything wrong to them, yet I'm getting this kind of treatment. Makes me wonder if there really is any karma. If yes, then how are these kinds of people able to escape that? Now on to the next story. Story 8. Wife started doing yoga every day and staying late, so I hired a PI who caught her cheating with the instructor. Then I exposed her affair at the Christmas party and served her with divorce papers. I, 37 male, met my wife, 33 female, 12 years ago at a cafe in the city. I remember the day vividly. She was sitting at a table drinking a cup of warm tea and reading a book while she was wearing this adorable little dress and a sweater. Right away, I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. I was never really much of a ladies' man, so it took a little while for me to work up the nerve to talk to her. But when I did, we hit it off right away. We dated for 3 years, and we've been married for 9. She and I have gone through a lot together, but in the end, we've both always known that we had each other. After we got married, we wanted to try to have a baby and start our family. Now we have one beautiful daughter. It really felt like we were the perfect, happy family. She and I both work full-time. We have good jobs with good benefits and a solid security blanket. I knew she wanted to quit her job and stay home with our daughter full-time, but that wasn't practical for us unless we wanted to make a lot of major cutbacks in our lifestyle. After the pandemic, her job started this healthy lifestyle reward system. The idea was to get the employees who had been more sedentary when they were working from home back up and being active by rewarding them with gift cards, tickets, etc. My wife was actually pretty excited about it. She had been quite stressed out and she wanted to start taking a yoga or Pilates class, something like that, so she could try to de-stress while she was being active. It was the perfect time to do it, so she enrolled in a yoga class at a local studio. She started out by going once or twice a week just so she could get a hang of how it works. Every time she came back, she was exhausted, but she would tell me that she could already feel how she was less stressed out. As time went on, she was taking more classes at the studio. Twice a week turned into every other day, which turned into almost every day. She was enjoying herself, so I didn't really think much about it. She had even told me about friends she made at the studio. It seemed like her social life was thriving. She was happy, and she was confident. Everything seemed fine. One day, she came to me and told me that she was changing her class schedule to take something in the evening instead of in the morning. It worked out better for her, so I didn't think much of it at the time. Her morning classes usually lasted an hour. She'd return home about an hour and a half after leaving. The evening classes took a lot longer. I wasn't immediately suspicious that something was going on, but after a couple of weeks, I started to wonder. I pulled her aside one day and asked her why she was always coming home so late, and she told me that the class was more intensive, so it lasted a bit longer. She explained that with this class, they begin with a meditation, then go into more elaborate poses, and then after class, she and a lot of the other students would hang around and chat for a bit. She was so sure about everything she was saying that I had no reason to doubt it. I'd never had a reason not to trust her before, so my worries were soothed. It wasn't long after that conversation that I was at work one day when I got a text message from my wife. Attached was a picture of her standing in front of our bedroom mirror, naked. She and I had never really sent each other pictures like that, especially not while I was at work. It was something that I'd heard other couples have done to spice things up a bit. What really caught my eye with the entire message was the text attached in the message. She said that she couldn't stop thinking about the night before. I was confused. We hadn't done anything the night before. I didn't know what she was talking about. She replied back very quickly, telling me that she had sent the text by mistake. She made a joke about how voice-to-text didn't capture what she said properly. She tried to clarify it by saying she couldn't wait for tonight. I honestly didn't buy what she was saying. I thought right away that she had sent me the entire message by mistake. I knew it was meant for someone else. I spent the rest of the day at work anxious and worried that something was wrong. When I got home, my wife was instantly telling me that she had a headache, felt dehydrated, and had been vomiting. I thought it was interesting timing. I had an old friend from high school who used to work as a cop, but they changed their career to work as a private investigator. I reached out to him and explained my situation, and he said that he'd be happy to help. I played it cool while he was looking into what was going on. I didn't want to raise any suspicion to give my wife the upper hand in continuing her lies. About a week after he started, we met for lunch at a restaurant in town where he showed me the evidence. I had been right to suspect there was something going on. I was honestly shocked to find out that it was with her yoga instructor. In hindsight, she only referred to the instructor as the instructor. She never used any pronouns like he or she. Maybe I was in the wrong, but I assumed it was a woman. On top of that, I had voiced my concerns to her about her late-night classes, and she lied to me with such ease. He showed me evidence in the form of pictures, videos, and messages. He was somehow able to get his hands on a full collection of documents for their infidelity. Divorce was the only option for us. I would not be giving her a choice in the matter, we wouldn't be going to therapy, and we wouldn't even be having a discussion about it. I went back home trying to think of the best way to go about all of it. I was angry, and I was beyond hurt by her. I wanted to get even for what happened. She had a Christmas party for work coming up, so I figured I could use that opportunity to embarrass her. After all, it was her work health benefits program that sparked all of this. I had everything ready to go to serve her with the divorce papers. So when we left later that day, I mentally prepared myself for what I was getting into. As with every word Christmas party, I went to my wife, walked around the room, and said hello to people while I joined the few people that I was familiar with. After a few minutes, though, I went around the room and introduced myself as my wife's ex-husband. I enjoyed seeing a little wrinkle in their eyebrows when I introduced myself that way. I could tell that they were all curious about why I was there. One of her coworkers said that she had no idea we ended things. I got to tell her that my wife didn't either. She was very confused, but I watched her spread what I said to everyone else there. Everybody in the room was gossiping about my wife. They probably thought I was crazy too, but I didn't care. Toward the end of the evening, her boss got everyone's attention and made a toast. When she was done, I chimed in on the tail end and made my announcement. My wife stared at me with her jaw hanging on the ground when I told her about how I found out about her affair. Everyone else in the room was a little tipsy and very intrigued by what I was saying. They would be talking about that Christmas party for years. Honestly, I wouldn't blame my wife for quitting. I told my wife that it was over, gave her the papers, and drove home without her. As far as the instructor goes, I called the studio that he worked for, and they have a strict policy about employees being involved with clients. He was fired from the studio. Now on to the next story. Story 9. Funded my girlfriend's college education with my hard-earned money, but she cheated on me while attending parties. I never thought I would share something like this publicly, but here we are. I guess I'm just trying to process and get over what happened and move on as soon as possible, because this thing shattered me mentally and physically. I work in a healthcare center as a registered dietitian. That's where I met Jules, my girlfriend of 3 years. She worked there as a receptionist. I got instantly attracted to her because of her humble and polite behavior. Not only that, she was way too smart to be a receptionist. Humbleness and politeness were traits required for a receptionist, but her ability to take up multiple tasks was amazing. She soon started taking care of the accounts and other office work at the healthcare center. I asked her out for dinner during one of the hectic days, and that's how it started. Knowing her, I got to know Jules was a very bright student and brilliant academically, but due to her family issues, she couldn't complete her education. Her father was an addict, and her mother was hardly present. Jules had to take care of her siblings and household chores while her mother slogged 2 jobs to feed 4 children. Jules couldn't pursue college because she had to take up jobs to support her family. I felt so bad and wanted to help her because she deserved to become what she always dreamed of as a child, and so I decided to fund her college and help her with the college expenses. She denied taking any help from me and said that she would save and have it on her own. She had been working for 5 years, and looking at her savings rate, it wasn't a realistic plan at all. This was not her fault at all because she had to send a substantial amount of her salary to her house. After a lot of analyzing and discussing, she agreed. Last autumn, she started college and she moved to the college dorm, which was in the adjacent city. We have met only twice after her college during her holidays, and she was happy to get back to studies after so many years. During her last semester break, she visited me. This time, she told me about her worries that she was not able to fit into the college society and was left out because she didn't have as many resources as other girls. I asked her not to worry about things like that and to focus on her academics. She immediately got annoyed at me for not understanding how embarrassing it is sometimes when all her friends head out for a night out, but she couldn't because she cannot afford it. She said it was not just about one odd night but a regular thing. Her friends and classmates wore the latest fashion while she felt outdated. Ever since she started college, she became very body conscious and tried hard to fit in with the so-called college society norms. I assured her that I was able to understand her feelings but advised her that instead of feeling it this way, she should be grateful that she was in college and now would be able to earn better jobs. Her situation makes sense as she never had those lifestyles or stuff as a kid and was completely abandoned, so it was her complete right to live her life. But I find her behavior rather immature. She should have understood that her situation was not like others who were parent-funded. To cheer her up, I took her out to one of the most happening cafes in the town. Jules saw a few of her college mates and asked me to go somewhere else. I asked her what's wrong if they see us together, but she held my hand tightly and told me that she was not wearing a proper dress and that she didn't want any of them to see her like that. I got really frustrated at her behavior but didn't say a word that might hurt her and left the cafe. This was just not one incident. She's getting more into materialistic and superficial stuff. She has also been acting too rebellious and unpredictable these days. Day by day, her desires were getting out of my pocket, and it's not like I didn't have money, but her actions were rather immature. The money that I gave her for emergency funds, she started wasting it on useless things. Now, if I refuse her for anything, it leads her to have an extreme emotional breakdown and victim play of calling herself a poor and unlucky woman, which I hated the most about her personality. No matter how much I loved her, I would never disagree with the fact that it was straight emotional manipulation. And even when I was doing everything for her, she didn't really appreciate it. She always played a victim card on me, which melted my heart and led me to do things that made me uncomfortable doing so. After the argument, there were still a few days left for her college to start, but she left, giving me the false excuse that she was in need of money and wanted to do a side hustle. I asked her not to waste her strength earning for stupid things, to make good use of her time and to do her best academically. I also asked her not to lose focus on the important thing that she always dreamed of. She again got annoyed at me for not understanding her point of view, so I asked her to do whatever she wanted. She blamed me for not letting her live her life. I had to remind her that I was funding money for her education and not for her lifestyle. She started crying and told me that I was looking down on her for being poor and not privileged enough like me. I apologized and asked her to stay, but she didn't and left the same night. I'm a very private, introverted person and stay off the addiction to social media, so was Jules earlier. She used to be so busy in her life with work and household chores that she didn't have time for mindless social media scrolling. But after getting into college, she has become addicted to following trends and being part of a fast-paced society, and being a social butterfly was one of them. The other day, I got a call from Jules for immediate help that she needs money to participate in a science competition. I got really happy and asked her to tell me the amount, which I would send right away. She told me it was $500, and I stopped thinking for a minute. I have also participated in a science competition, but they never asked for such a huge amount for a science competition. I tasked her with telling me why she needed this amount of money and told her not to lie. She remained silent and hung up the call. I called her again and again, but she didn't respond, and my irritation was above the bar. Her attitude was unbearable, and instead of being grateful and appreciative, she was making me feel like I was not doing enough for her. Even though she was the person who was continuously lying and hiding things, she made me feel like I was the culprit. Her attitude is making me anxious. Earlier, we used to call and FaceTime each other regularly, but after that fight, she didn't call or text me for many days. I decided not to call or text her this time and wait for her to do so, and if she didn't, I would visit her at the college. After a week, I got a text from her saying she was busy with her assignments and that she would call me at night. I stayed up until late in the night waiting for her to call, but she didn't. A few days later, I got a text from my school friend, Jacob, who is from the same city as Jules' college. He said he was at a party last weekend, and there were many people from my girlfriend's university. He said he saw a woman at the party who looked like Jules, but it was too dark and she was drunk and with a guy, so he didn't approach her. That really sparked my curiosity, so I asked him if he had any pictures. It was indeed Jules, wearing a very inappropriately revealing dress, drolling over a guy, drunk. It felt so disgusting to see her like that because she never touched alcohol. I zoomed in again and again to make sure it was her because, obviously, it was hard to believe the person you love turns out to be completely different. Look, I'm not a controlling type of person, but hiding something from your partner is actually considered a form of cheating, and my stomach dropped when I witnessed such a thing. I never went to parties without her, or if I ever did, Jules knew and created a drama out of it, and now she was doing the complete opposite of what she asked me to do. The same night, I got a call from her, and we finally had a conversation for hours. She told me about her college stuff and that she had a full week off. The whole time I was talking to her, I was waiting for her to talk about the party, but she didn't. I couldn't hold myself and asked her about it. Man, she denied it outrightly and told me that she doesn't like having parties at all. I was just so shocked at her nonchalant lies. I feel done with her now. Update 1. So I visited her college. I guess I was delusional about ignoring such things, so I finally decided to make a surprise visit to her college and see what's the matter with her. It was clear that something like that was going to happen sooner or later, and honestly, deep down, I was prepared for that. After reaching her, I called her, but she didn't respond to my calls. I got really mad at her for doing this to me. I mean, it was not just about missing one call. I called her multiple times for almost more than an hour, and she kept ignoring me. What if there was some sort of emergency? Her behavior was alarming, and I could not predict or draw any conclusions. I checked into a hotel. She called me the same night, and I told her that I waited for her outside her dorm. Her response was cold toward me. Instead of being sorry about her carelessness, she just said she was busy. We had a huge argument on this, and I hung up the call after a while. God knows what she thought. She called me again. I ignored it. After several calls, when I finally responded, she apologized and asked for my location. She was there in my hotel room within an hour. She looked exhausted, and her eyes were red as if she hadn't slept for days. She told me that she was just going with her friends and exploring the cities, and her phone was silent. She apologized to me for being careless, and I let it slide. Hearing her out, I felt she was not the same person anymore. She was never the extroverted, outgoing party animal she has now become. Her desire to fit in with the college environment and peer pressure were the biggest red flags of hers. I asked her again if she had gone out to that party, the one which my friend mentioned, and she immediately denied it. I took out my phone and showed her the picture. She couldn't process what happened and remained silent with teary eyes. I asked her who was the guy. She started to cry. She told me it was her friend's birthday, and she couldn't refuse and, out of peer pressure, she had a few drinks. I told her that she could have told me the truth the first time I questioned her. But I don't know why she hid this from me. She held me and said that she couldn't refuse her friend's request and didn't want to tell me because I would get angry. I laughed and asked her what happens now. Hiding did more damage to our relationship, and what else could she be hiding? She kept defending herself, and we just sat there not talking to each other. Finally, I told her that I didn't hate her and I just wanted her to be honest with me. I don't remember the last time we had sex, and it created more suspicions in me because whenever I tried to initiate, she would shut me off. Half of the time she was texting on her phone and told me it was her friends. I was so heartbroken that she was not even happy for a single moment to spend time with me. Her stuff was pretty expensive and she was wearing an expensive watch. I asked her where she got them, and she told me that she won a few awards in that science competition, and the watch was one of them. I was very disappointed that she didn't even care to inform me about such things, as if she was losing interest in me. She only texted me whenever she needed money or had an emergency. Anyway, we finally made out, and she told me she was tired and slept on the other side of the bed. She never let me touch her phone earlier. She was not so guarded about her phone. It used to lie here and there, and she wasn't bothered if I used it to Google or check the calendar or so. But now the way she was guarding her phone, it was suspicious. After she was asleep, I opened her phone and checked the gallery. There was nothing really suspicious, just her and her friends. I checked the phone and saw a whole lot of social media apps. We never had any of these apps earlier. After joining the college, she told me she was on Facebook, but now seeing all sorts of social media apps was alarming. Also, she never told me about her virtual presence. She seemed to be too active on nearly all these platforms. I opened her Instagram account, and there were her pictures of clubs and many more things that were not in her gallery, and that was unbelievable. She broke my trust very badly. Naturally, my curiosity got the best of me, and I looked through her DMs. There was nothing to see until something caught my eye. It was a restricted account named Michael. My hands were shivering while opening the text, and it had an eerie vibe. So I finally clicked on the text, and there it was, the truth behind her behavior. The last text was that she was going to her parents' house, and his reply was that he would see her soon, baby. She told him that she was going to her parents when she was actually with me. He was the same guy who was sitting next to her in that picture my friend showed. It was devastating. I did everything for her, just for her to betray and cheat on me. I read the whole chat and it was her senior. They shared nudes with each other and had sex. She also demanded expensive things from him in return, which I failed to do. I realized that all her excuses of being busy with assignments and extra classes were nothing but a lie of lies to sell her body for a few accessories. I tried my best to help her make her future and be a stable and independent woman, and I didn't realize that she actually went pretty low to sell herself off for a few materialistic things. She sold our relationship just to be a social butterfly in college. I was disappointed and surprised because she always had high moral values, but I guess it was all an act. There were text messages where she said that she missed him and sexed. I couldn't stand reading any more of it, so I pretty much freaked out, had no idea what to do, and sat there like a ghost for an hour. I took everything on my phone for proof and decided to ditch her immediately. I wasn't in for any negotiation. Confrontations meant again a bunch of lies, and I'm just done with her. It was hard for me to process, but I packed everything and left while she was asleep. I spent the rest of the night sitting alone at the station and took the first train back to my home. The next day, she called me and texted me, But I refused to do anything and just laid back under the circumstances before I decided to cut all the connections off from her, which also meant no money for the college fee. Her fee was due for the next week, and the whole week I kept ignoring her and dealing with the harsh truth on my own. Trust me, it was the cruelest. She tried contacting me through mutual friends. I already told everyone what happened and asked them not to entertain her. She deserves to be on the street after she pulled and manipulated me both mentally and physically. The next day, she showed up at my house. Gladly, I wasn't home. My roommate called me that Jules was there. Yeah, I had a new roommate after Jules moved out for her college. I told him to say that I wasn't in town and don't know when I would return. I did the same as she did to me back then. She called me nonstop and I didn't respond. I stayed at my friend's place that night. The next day, when I returned home, my roommate asked me to speak to Jules. She was crying profusely and was really guilty of her actions. He told me that peer pressure sometimes makes us do unethical and immature things. I just nodded. He knew our relationship from the surface, but I know how much she has changed, and it was just not about peer pressure. She wasn't 18. She is a grown-up woman and should know how to keep herself grounded in a situation like that, but she didn't. Update 2. I thought she would get her clues from my ghosting, but she didn't. She kept texting me, asking for closure, asking for a reason for ghosting her, for breaking up with her, not only once but multiple times. She showed up at my house sometimes when I used to be at home. I didn't answer the door and left her standing outside. But she didn't deter. Ultimately, I had to give up and meet her. What could I do? She was bothering all our mutual friends and my roommate to the point that they requested me to get done with it. I called her, and the way she responded seemed like she had just placed her finger on the answer button, waiting for my call. It made me laugh at the realization of how she used to ignore my calls. As soon as she heard my voice, she started crying and pleading with me not to do this. She started with those classic lines of, "I couldn't live without you. I had dreamed about our future. You cannot ruin this," and all that. I told her to cut the crap out because I'm no longer falling for her fake emotions. I told her I was done being her ATM. She considered me as the source of her money and nothing else. She acted confused and asked me what I was saying. I told her that she could continue with Michael as he was providing her with better amenities than I was. After hearing his name, she went silent. She said there was a misunderstanding and pleaded to meet me once. She said, "Let's sit and sort this out." That sounded hilarious to me. I was like, "Babe, I'm done sorting out with you. I'm out of your way. You can do whatever you want with your life and your body." She tried her last bet of manipulating me using her victim card. She said that, if you cut me off, I would never be able to graduate from the college. I said, "Fine by me. Not my problem anymore." I hung up the call. She called me a couple of times after that, but she stopped bothering my friends and roommate after that. It's been more than a month since then, and I'm in C with her since I ghosted her, and I plan to remain so. I'm just moving on with my life and don't think about her anymore. Update 3. Thanks for all the support. I'm in a much better place mentally. I have moved on. I took a solo trip to the mountains last month, and it gave me a lot of mental peace. This is going to be a super mini update. Yesterday was my friend's engagement party. There I got to catch up with other friends, some of them mutual to Jules. I got to know that Jules had dropped out of college and she was back in the city working as a receptionist at some small office. It wasn't shocking because I knew that would happen. Looked like it was all just for fun with Michael, and when he was done, he moved on. He is a 20-year-old rich lad. What else do you expect him to do? Marry her and pay for her college fees. She got what she deserved. She bargained her future for temporary adrenaline and expensive items just to show off and come off cool in front of her college peers. Now on to the next story. Story 10. My cheating ex-wife left me for her high school boyfriend, but they're still shunned when they visit our small hometown. My wife and I were born and raised in the same small town. I was a few years older than her, so we didn't interact until both of us were finished with college and had moved back. She had just come back after finishing school. The two of us bumped into each other in the grocery store and struck up a conversation. I knew of her because it was a small town, but I didn't know her personally. She had the same deal with me. After checking out, we talked to our cars, exchanged numbers, and went about our day. From the start, we seemed like a good match. We both wanted to live in the town we were born in and eventually raise a family there. The two of us also both worked in the medical sector, so this was another similarity we had. It was slow going at first because neither of us was sure it was going to work, but as time passed, it became clear it was turning serious. I always knew that I wanted a wife, kids, a house, and the whole 9 yards. She seemed like she did as well, so when I proposed, it wasn't that much of a surprise. The whole town seemed to be celebrating with us. Like I said, it was a small town. Both our families were well known and had a lot of friends here. I suppose that was why I was so insistent on coming back to eventually live here. It was a great place to just live and raise a family. Once we got married, the two of us decided to rent an apartment while we saved money up for a down payment on a house. Both our parents were more than willing to help us, but for now we just wanted to see how much we could save. I might seem like I'm coming off as straightforward and practical, but I did love my wife very much. I'd never meshed with someone like I did her, and I assume she felt the same. For the first 2.5 years of marriage, things were going great. It was around this time, however, that I noticed my wife getting rather short with me. She'd snap at me about things that normally didn't bother her before, and it was a little startling. I thought she might have been dealing with some stuff at work, so I gave her a little time. After 6 months, the attitude started to change. My wife seemed happy and giddy again, though. Then something else started to pop up. My wife was always busy when we did interact. Things were fine, but this seemed to happen less and less. At the time, I was just glad she was no longer snapping at me. But there was this little voice in my head telling me something was off. I just want to tell you that you need to listen to it because usually it isn't wrong. A part of me wanted to ask outright if she was cheating on me, but I didn't know how that was going to go without any evidence behind me. So when my wife told me she was going to go out with friends, I showed up at that friend's house. They were surprised to see me and instantly looked guilty. It didn't take long to get them to tell me what was going on. So I went home and waited for my wife to come home to confront her about her cheating. The first thing she seemed most upset about when I confronted her was that her friend had broken her confidence. The guy she was cheating on me with was her high school boyfriend, who also lived in town and was married at the time. She was treating me terribly. She learned he was taken, which was crazy to me. My wife was married to me. I would think that would have played some factor in her decision-making. But it didn't. When she started treating me nicer, or what I perceived as nicer, she and the guy started up a relationship. I was in shock for a while, unsure of what to say or do. Eventually, I asked her why she did this. My wife gave me some crap about her high school boyfriend being her one true love. She didn't think they stood a chance of getting back together because he lived across the country. However, just before he got married, he moved back to the town with his wife and thought that was her chance. I asked what about me, and she just cried. The tears would have moved me at one point, but no longer. My only response to her was that she would get the divorce she wanted so she could be with her high school boyfriend and precious true love. We had a month-to-month lease on the apartment, so it wouldn't be that hard to get out of it. She told me I could keep the apartment if I wanted, and she'd go live with her guy. I wanted to mention that the guy was married, but I didn't care anymore. My soon-to-be ex-wife was no longer my problem, frankly. To my surprise, she did end up living with the guy. His wife had left town to go back to be with her parents, leaving his house with an empty spot just for my wife. It was almost so romantic if you didn't realize that both of them had blown up their marriages to be together. Once those two were moved in together and the divorce process started, the rumors started to fly through town. Everyone was eventually coming up to me, apologizing about what happened and telling me that they were sorry for how everything went down. I was embarrassed at first for the town to know what happened, but then I realized how my ex was being treated. She and her guy were essentially being treated like the town pariahs. No one wanted anything to do with them. What they had done was unforgivable in their eyes. It got so bad that the guy sold the house, took my ex with him, and left one night. I wasn't upset because I was glad that I would no longer have to see her around town. To think that the town itself had sent her running with her tail between her legs. Anytime my ex came back to visit family, which was a couple of times a year, mind you, the town shunned her when she brought the guy with her. It was even worse. I eventually moved on and met another woman. She was someone who had been in my class. Like me, she was also dealing with a divorce because of her husband having an affair. It's not to say the two of us bonded over this, but it was something we could relate to about each other. Now that the two of us are married and expecting our first child, we have our own house in the same small town we were born and raised in, which is exactly what I always wanted. Turns out I just wanted it with the wrong woman at first. My ex-wife, as far as I know, is still with the guy, but I have heard rumors of the two of them fighting in public anytime they visited town. It was fitting to know that the two of them hadn't been able to run off into the sunset like they initially wanted. I am just not going to think about them, and we focus on the new life I'm building with my second wife. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.